Astral Body and Other Astral Phenomena by A. E. Pauwell. Introduction. The purpose of this book is to present to the student of Theosophy a condensed synthesis of the information at present available concerning the astral body of man, together with a description and explanation of the astral world and its phenomena. The book is thus a natural sequel of the etheric double and allied phenomena published in 1925. As in the case of the etheric double, the compiler has consolidated the information obtained from a large number of books, a list of which is given, arranging the material, which covers a vast field and is exceedingly complex, as methodically as lay within his power. It is hoped that by this means present and future students of the subject will be saved much labor and research, being able not only to find the information they require presented in a comparatively small compass, but also, with the help of the marginal references, to refer, should they so desire, to the original sources of information. In order that the book may fulfill its purpose by being kept within reasonable dimensions, the general plan followed has been to expound the principles underlying astral phenomena, omitting particular examples or instances. Lecturers and others who wish specific illustrations of the principles enunciated will find the marginal references useful as a clue to the places where the examples they seek may be found. Again, so far as the complexities and ramifications of the subject permit, the method has been to explain the form side first, before the life side, i.e., to describe first the objective mechanism of phenomena, and then the activities of consciousness which are expressed through that mechanism. The careful student, bearing this in, page 14, mind, will thus recognize many passages, which at first glance might appear to be repetitive, in which the same phenomenon is described first from the point of view of the outer material form and then again later from the point of view of the spirit or consciousness. It is hoped that the present volume may be followed by similar ones dealing with man's mental and causal bodies, thus completing the consolidation of all information so far available regarding man's constitution up to the causal or higher mental level. There is today a great deal of information on these and similar subjects, but it is for the most part scattered over large numbers of books. In order, therefore, to make the whole of it available for the student, whose time for intensive study is limited, such books as the present is intended to be, are, in the writer's opinion, urgently needed. The proper study of mankind is man, and the subject is so vast, so absorbing, and so important that everything possible should be done to make readily accessible to all who thirst for such knowledge the whole of the information which has so far been accumulated. Chapter 1. General Description. Before proceeding to a detailed study of the astral body, and of phenomena associated with it, it may be useful to lay before the student a brief outline of the ground it is proposed to cover, in order to give in proper perspective a view of the whole subject and of the relative dependence of its several parts. Briefly, the astral body of man is a vehicle, to clairvoyant sight not unlike the physical body, surrounded by an aura of flashing colors, composed of matter of an order of fineness higher than that of physical matter, in which feelings, passions, desires and emotions are expressed and which acts as a bridge or medium of transmission between the physical brain and the mind, the latter operating in the still higher vehicle, the mind-body. While every man possesses and uses an astral body, comparatively few are conscious of its existence or can control and function in it in full consciousness. In the case of large numbers of persons it is scarcely more than an inchoate mass of astral matter, the movements and activities of which are little under the control of the man himself, the ego. With others, however, the astral body is a well-developed and thoroughly organized vehicle, possessing a life of its own and conferring on its owner many and useful powers. During the sleep of the physical body, an undeveloped man leads a dreamy, vague existence, in his relatively primitive astral body, remembering little or nothing of his sleep life when he reawakens in his physical body. In the case of a developed man, however, the life in the astral body, whilst the physical body is wrapped in slumber, is active, interesting and useful, and the memory of it may, under certain conditions, be brought down into the physical brain. The life of such a man ceases to be a series of days of consciousness and nights of oblivion, becoming instead a continuous life of unbroken consciousness, alternating between the physical and the astral planes or worlds. One of the first things a man learns to do in his astral body is to travel in it, it being possible for the astral body to move, with great rapidity, and to great distances from the sleeping physical body. An understanding of this phenomenon throws much light on a large number of so-called occult phenomena, such as apparitions of many kinds, knowledge of places never visited physically, etc. The astral body being par excellence the vehicle of feelings and emotions, an understanding of its composition and of the ways in which it operates is of considerable value in understanding many aspects of man's psychology, both individual and collective, and also provides a simple explanation of the mechanism of many phenomena revealed by modern psychoanalysis. A clear understanding of the structure and nature of the astral body, of its possibilities and its limitations, is essential to a comprehension of the life into which men pass after physical death. The many kinds of heavens, hells, and purgatorial existences believed in by followers of innumerable religions, all fall naturally into place and become intelligible as soon as we understand the nature of the astral body and of the astral world. A study of the astral body will be of assistance also in our understanding of many of the phenomena of the seance room and of certain psychic or non-physical methods of healing disease. Those who are interested in what is termed the fourth dimension will find also a confirmation of many of the theories which have been formulated by means of geometry and mathematics, in a study of astral world phenomena, as described by those who have observed them. A study of the astral body of man thus takes us far afield and expands enormously a conception of life based solely on the physical world and the purely physical senses. As we proceed, we shall see that the physical senses, invaluable as they are, by no means represent the limit of what man's vehicles may teach him of the worlds in which he lives. The awakening into functioning activity of astral faculties reveals a new world within the old world, and, when a man becomes able to read aright its significance, he will obtain such an expanded view of his own life, and all nature, as will reveal to him the almost limitless possibilities latent in man. From this, sooner or later but inevitably, there will come the impulse, and later the unshakable determination, to master these worlds, and himself, to rise superior to his earthly destiny, and to become an intelligent cooperator with what has been aptly termed the supreme will in evolution. We will now proceed to study, in detail, the astral body and many astral phenomena. Chapter 2. Composition and Structure. Astral matter exists in 7 grades or orders of fineness, corresponding to the 7 grades of physical matter, which are solid, liquid, gaseous, etheric, superetheric, subatomic and atomic. No names for these astral states, however, having so far been devised, it is usual to describe them, either by the number of the grade or subplane, the finest being number 1, the coarsest number 7, or by the corresponding physical grade. We speak of astral solid matter, meaning thereby the 7th or lowest variety, astral etheric matter, meaning the 4th from the finest, and so on. Astral matter, being much finer than physical matter, interpenetrates it. Every physical atom, therefore, floats in a sea of astral matter, which surrounds it and fills every interstice in physical matter. It is, of course, well known that even in the hardest substance no 2 atoms ever touch one another, the space between 2 adjacent atoms being in fact enormously larger than the atoms themselves. Orthodox physical science long ago has posited an ether which interpenetrates all known substances, the densest solid as well as the most rarefied gas, and just as this ether moves with perfect freedom between the particles of densest matter, so does astral matter interpenetrate it in turn, and moves with perfect freedom among its particles. Thus a being living in the astral world might be occupying the same space as a being living in the physical world, yet each would be entirely unconscious of the other, and would in no way impede the free movement of the other. The student should thoroughly familiarize himself with this fundamental conception, as, without grasping it clearly, it is not possible to understand large numbers of astral phenomena. The principle of interpenetration makes it clear that the different realms of nature are not separated in space, but exist about us here and now, so that to perceive and investigate them no movement in space is necessary, but only an opening within ourselves of the senses by means of which they can be perceived. The astral world, or plane, is thus a condition of nature, rather than a locality. It must be noted that a physical atom cannot be directly broken up into astral atoms. If the force which whirls the, approximately, 14,000 million bubbles in koilin into an ultimate physical atom be pressed back by an effort of will over the threshold of the astral plane, the atom disappears, releasing the bubbles. The same force, working then on a higher level, expresses itself, not through one astral atom, but through a group of 49 such atoms. A similar relationship, represented by the number 49, exists between the atoms of any two other contiguous planes of nature. Thus an astral atom contains 495 or 282,475,249 bubbles, a mental atom, 494 bubbles, and so on. There is reason to believe that electrons are astral atoms. Physicists state that a chemical atom of hydrogen contains probably from 700 to 1,000 electrons. Occult research asserts that a chemical atom of hydrogen contains 882 astral atoms. This may be a coincidence, but that does not seem probable. It should be noted that ultimate physical atoms are of two kinds, male and female. In the male, force pours in from the astral world, passes through the atom and out into the physical world. In the female, force passes in from the physical world, through the atom, and out into the astral world, thus vanishing from the physical world. Astral matter corresponds with curious accuracy to the physical matter which it interpenetrates, each variety of physical matter attracting astral matter of corresponding density. Thus solid physical matter is interpenetrated by what we call solid astral matter, liquid physical by liquid astral, i.e., by matter of the sixth subplane, and similarly with gaseous and the four grades of etheric matter, each of which is interpenetrated by the corresponding grade of astral matter. Precisely as it is necessary that the physical body should contain within its constitution physical matter in all its conditions, solid, liquid, gaseous and etheric, so it is indispensable that the astral body should contain particles of all the 7 astral subplanes, though, of course, the proportions may vary greatly in different cases. The astral body of man thus being composed of matter of all 7 grades, it is possible for him to experience all varieties of desire to the fullest possible extent, the highest as well as the lowest. It is the peculiar type of response possessed by astral matter which enables the astral matter to serve as the sheath in which the self can gain experience of sensation. In addition to the ordinary matter of the astral plane, that which is known as the third elemental kingdom, or simply as the elemental essence of the astral plane, also enters largely into the composition of man's astral body, and forms what is called the desire elemental, which we shall deal with more fully in later chapters. Astral elemental essence consists of matter of the 6 lower levels of the astral plane, vivified by the second outpouring, from the second person of the Trinity. Astral matter of the highest or atomic level, similarly vivified, is known as monadic essence. In an undeveloped man, the astral body is a cloudy, loosely organized, vaguely outlined mass of astral matter, with a great predominance of substances from the lower grades. It is gross, dark in color, and dense, often so dense that the outline of the physical body is almost lost in it, and is thus fitted to respond to stimuli connected with the passions and appetites. In size, it extends in all directions about 10 or 12 inches beyond the physical body. In an average moral and intellectual man, the astral body is considerably larger, extending about 18 inches on each side of the body. Its materials are more balanced and finer in quality, the presence of the rarer kinds giving a certain luminous quality to the whole, and its outline is clear and definite. In the case of a spiritually developed man, the astral body is still larger in size and is composed of the finest particles of each grade of astral matter, the higher largely predominating. There is so much to be said regarding the colors of astral bodies that the subject is reserved for a separate chapter. Here, however, it may be stated that in undeveloped types the colors are coarse and muddy, gradually becoming more and more luminous as the man develops emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. The very name, astral, inherited from medieval alchemists, signifies starry, being intended to allude to the luminous appearance of astral matter. As already said, the astral body of a man not only permeates the physical body, but also extends around it in every direction like a cloud. That portion of the astral body which extends beyond the limits of the physical body is usually termed the astral aura. Intense feeling means a large aura. It may here be mentioned that increased size of the aura is a prerequisite for initiation, and the qualifications should be visible in it. The aura naturally increases with each initiation. The aura of the Buddha is said to have been 3 miles in radius. The matter of the physical body having a very strong attraction for the matter of the astral body, it follows that by far the greater portion, about 99%, of the astral particles are compressed within the periphery of the physical body, only the remaining 1%, filling the rest of the ovoid and forming the aura. The central portion of the astral body thus takes the exact form of the physical body and is, in fact, very solid and definite, and quite clearly distinguishable from the surrounding aura. It is usually termed the astral counterpart of the physical body. The exact correspondence of the astral body with the physical, however, is merely a matter of external form, and does not at all involve any similarity of function in the various organs, as we shall see more fully in the chapter on chakrams. Not only man's physical body, but everything physical, has its corresponding order of astral matter in constant association with it, not to be separated from it except by a very considerable exertion of occult force, and even then only to be held apart from it as long as force is being definitely exerted to that end. In other words, every physical object has its astral counterpart. But as the astral particles are constantly moving among one another as easily as those of a physical liquid, there is no permanent association between any one physical particle and that amount of astral matter which happens at any given moment to be acting as its counterpart. Usually the astral portion of an object projects somewhat beyond the physical part of it, so that metals, stones, etc., are seen surrounded by an astral aura. If some part of a man's physical body be removed, for example, by amputation, the coherence of the living astral matter is stronger than its attraction towards the severed portion of the physical. Consequently, the astral counterpart of the limb will not be carried away with the severed physical limb. Since the astral matter has acquired the habit of keeping that particular form, it will continue to retain the original shape, but will soon withdraw within the limits of the maimed form. The same phenomenon takes place in the case of a tree from which a branch has been severed. In the case of an inanimate body, however, such as a chair or a basin, there is not the same kind of individual life to maintain cohesion. Consequently, when the physical object is broken, the astral counterpart would also be divided. Quite apart from the 7 grades of matter, arranged in order of fineness, there is also a totally distinct classification of astral matter, according to its type. In theosophical literature, the degree of fineness is usually designated the horizontal division, and the type the vertical division. The types, of which there are 7, are as thoroughly intermingled as are the constituents of the atmosphere, and in every astral body there is matter of all 7 types, the proportion between them showing the disposition of the man, whether he be devotional or philosophic, artistic or scientific, pragmatic or mystic. The whole of the astral portion of our Earth and of the physical planets, together with the purely astral planets of our system, make up collectively the astral body of the solar logos, thus showing that the old pantheistic conception was a true one. Similarly, each of the 7 types of astral matter is to some extent regarded as a whole, a separate vehicle, and may be thought of as also the astral body of a subsidiary deity or minister, who is at the same time an aspect of the deity, a kind of ganglion or force center in him. Hence the slightest thought, movement, or alteration of any kind in the subsidiary deity is instantly reflected in some way or other in all the matter of the corresponding type. Such psychic changes occur periodically. Perhaps they correspond to inbreathing and outbreathing, or to the beating of the heart with us on the physical plane. It has been observed that the movements of the physical planets furnish a clue to the operation of the influences flowing from these changes, hence the rationale of astrological science. Hence, further, any such alteration must to some extent affect each man, in proportion to the amount of that type of matter which he possesses in his astral body. Thus, one change would affect the emotions, or the mind, or both, another might intensify nervous excitement and irritability, and so on. It is this proportion which determines in each man, animal, plant, or mineral certain fundamental characteristics which never change, sometimes called his note, color, or ray. To pursue this interesting line of thought further would take us beyond the scope of this book, so the student is referred to The Hidden Side of Things, Volume 1, pages 43 to 58. There are 7 subtypes in each type, making 49 subtypes in all. The type or ray is permanent through the whole planetary scheme, so that an elemental essence of type A will in due course ensoul minerals, plants, and animals of type A, and from it will emerge also human beings of the same type. The astral body slowly but constantly wears away, precisely as does the physical, but, instead of the process of eating and digesting food, the particles which fall away are replaced by others from the surrounding atmosphere. Nevertheless, the feeling of individuality is communicated to the new particles as they enter, and also the elemental essence included with each man's astral body undoubtedly feels itself a kind of entity, and acts accordingly for what it considers its own interests. Chapter 3. Colors. To clairvoyant sight, one of the principal features of an astral body consists of the colors which are constantly playing through it, these colors corresponding to, and being the expression in astral matter of feelings, passions, and emotions. All known colors, and many which are at present unknown to us, exist upon each of the higher planes of nature, but as we rise from one stage to another they become more delicate and more luminous, so that they may be described as higher octaves of color. As it is not possible to portray these octaves physically on paper, the above facts should be borne in mind when considering the colored illustrations of the astral body which are referred to below. The following is a list of the principal colors and the emotions of which they are an expression. Black, in thick clouds, hatred and malice. Red, deep red flashes, usually on a black ground, anger. A scarlet cloud, irritability. Brilliant scarlet, on the ordinary background of the aura, noble indignation. Lurid and sanguinary red, unmistakable, though not easy to describe, sensuality. Brown-gray, dull, hard brown-gray, selfishness, one of the commonest colors in the astral body. Brown-red, dull, almost rust color, avarice, usually arranged in parallel bars across the astral body. Greenish-brown, lit up by deep red or scarlet flashes, jealousy. In the case of an ordinary man there is usually much of this color present when he is in love. Gray, heavy, leaden, depression. Like the brown-red of avarice, arranged in parallel lines, conveying the impression of a cage. Gray, livid, a hideous and frightful hue, fear. Crimson, dull and heavy, selfish love. Rose color, unselfish love. When exceptionally brilliant, tinged with lilac, spiritual love for humanity. Orange, pride or ambition. Often found with irritability. Yellow, intellect, varies from a deep and dull tint, through brilliant gold, to clear and luminous lemon or primrose yellow. Dull yellow ochre implies the direction of faculty to selfish purposes, clear gamboge indicates a distinctly higher type, primrose yellow denotes intellect devoted to spiritual ends, gold indicates pure intellect applied to philosophy or mathematics. Green, in general, varies greatly in its significance, and needs study to be interpreted correctly, mostly it indicates adaptability. Gray-green, slimy in appearance, deceit and cunning. Emerald green, versatility, ingenuity, and resourcefulness, applied unselfishly. Pale, luminous blue-green, deep sympathy and compassion, with the power of perfect adaptability which only they can give. Bright apple green seems always to accompany strong vitality. Blue, dark and clear, religious feeling. It is liable to be tinted by many other qualities, thus becoming any shade from indigo or a rich deep violet to muddy gray-blue. Light blue, such as ultramarine or cobalt, devotion to a noble spiritual ideal. A tint of violet indicates a mixture of affection and devotion. Luminous lilac blue, usually accompanied by sparkling golden stars, the higher spirituality, with lofty spiritual aspirations. Ultraviolet, higher and purer developments of psychic faculties. Ultra-red, lower psychic faculties of one who dabbles in evil and selfish forms of magic. Joy shows itself in a general brightening and radiancy of both mental and astral bodies, and in a peculiar rippling of the surface of the body. Cheerfulness shows itself in a modified bubbling form of this, and also in a steady serenity. Surprise is shown by a sharp constriction of the mental body, usually communicated to both the astral and physical bodies, accompanied by an increased glow of the band of affection if the surprise is a pleasant one, and by an increase of brown and gray if the surprise is an unpleasant one. The constriction often causes unpleasant feelings, affecting sometimes the solar plexus, resulting in sinking and sickness, and sometimes the heart center, causing palpitation and even death. It will be understood that, as human emotions are hardly ever unmixed, so these colors are seldom perfectly pure, but more usually mixtures. Thus the purity of many colors is dimmed by the hard brown-gray of selfishness, or tinged with the deep orange of pride. In reading the full meaning of colors, other points have also to be taken into consideration: the general brilliance of the astral body, the comparative definiteness or indefiniteness of its outline, the relative brightness of the different centers of force, see Chapter 5. The yellow of intellect, the rose of affection, and the blue of devotion are always found in the upper part of the astral body. The colors of selfishness, avarice, deceit, and hatred are in the lower part. The mass of sensual feeling floats usually between the two. From this it follows that in the undeveloped man the lower portion of the ovoid tends to be larger than the upper, so that the astral body has the appearance of an egg with the small end uppermost. In the more developed man the reverse is the case, the small end of the egg pointing downwards. The tendency always is for the symmetry of the ovoid to reassert itself by degrees, so that such appearances are only temporary. Each quality, expressed as a color, has its own special type of astral matter, and the average position of these colors depends upon the specific gravity of the respective grades of matter. The general principle is that evil or selfish qualities express themselves in the comparatively slow vibrations of coarser matter, while good and unselfish qualities play through finer matter. This being so, fortunately for us, good emotions persist even longer than evil ones, the effect of a feeling of strong love or devotion remaining in the astral body long after the occasion that caused it has been forgotten. It is possible, though unusual, to have two rates of vibrations going on strongly in the astral body at the same time, example, love and anger. The after results will go on side by side, but one at a very much higher level than the other and therefore persisting longer. High unselfish affection and devotion belong to the highest, atomic, astral subplane, and these reflect themselves in the corresponding matter of the mental plane. They thus touch the causal, higher mental, body, not the lower mental. This is an important point of which the student should take a special note. The ego, who resides on the higher mental plane, is thus affected only by unselfish thoughts. Lower thoughts affect, not the ego, but the permanent atoms, see page 207. Consequently, in the causal body there would be gaps, not bad colors, corresponding to the lower feelings and thoughts. Selfishness, for example, would show itself as the absence of affection or sympathy. As soon as selfishness is replaced by its opposite, the gap in the causal body would be filled up. An intensification of the coarse colors of the astral body, representing base emotions, whilst finding no direct expression in the causal body, nevertheless tends somewhat to dim the luminosity of the colors representing the opposite virtues in the causal body. In order to realize the appearance of the astral body, it must be borne in mind that the particles of which it is composed are always in rapid motion. In the vast majority of cases the clouds of color melt into one another and are all the while rolling over one another, appearing and disappearing as they roll, the surface of the luminous mist resembling somewhat the surface of violently boiling water. The various colors, therefore, by no means retain the same positions, though there is a normal position towards which they tend to return. The main characteristics of the three types illustrated, the savage, the average man and the developed man, may be briefly summarized as follows. Savage type. A very large proportion of sensuality, deceit, selfishness, and greed are conspicuous. Fierce anger is implied by smears and blots of dull scarlet. Very little affection appears, and such intellect and religious feeling as exist are of the lowest possible kind. The outline is irregular and the colors blurred, thick and heavy. The whole body is evidently ill-regulated, confused and uncontrolled. Average men, sensuality is much less though still prominent, selfishness is also prominent and there is some capability of deceit for personal ends, though the green is beginning to divide into two distinct qualities, showing that cunning is gradually becoming adaptability. Anger is still marked, affection, intellect and devotion are more prominent and of a higher quality. The colors as a whole are more clearly defined and distinctly brighter, though none of them are perfectly clear. The outline of the body is more defined and regular. Developed men, undesirable qualities have almost entirely disappeared. Across the top of the body there is a strip of lilac, indicating spiritual aspiration. Above and enveloping the head there is a cloud of the brilliant yellow of intellect. Below that there is a broad belt of the blue of devotion. Then across the trunk there is a still wider belt of the rose of affection. And in the lower part of the body a large amount of the green of adaptability and sympathy finds its place. The colors are bright, luminous, in clearly marked bands, the outline is well defined, and the whole astral body conveys the impression of being orderly and under perfect control. Although we are not in this book dealing with the mental body, yet it should be mentioned that as a man develops, his astral body more and more resembles his mental body, until it becomes little more than a reflection of it in the grosser matter of the astral plane. This, of course, indicates that the man has his desires thoroughly under the control of the mind and is no longer apt to be swept away by surges of emotion. Such a man will no doubt be subject to occasional irritability, and to undesirable cravings of various sorts, but he knows enough now to repress these lower manifestations and not to yield to them. At a still later stage the mental body itself becomes a reflection of the causal body, since the man now learns to follow solely the promptings of the higher self, and to guide his reason exclusively by them. Thus the mind-body and the astral body of an arhat would have very little characteristic color of their own, but would be reproductions of the causal body in so far as their lower octaves could express it. They have a lovely iridescence, a sort of opalescent, mother-of-pearl effect, which is far beyond either description or representation. A developed man has 5 rates of vibration in his astral body. An ordinary man shows at least 9 rates, with a mixture of various shades in addition. Many people have 50 or 100 rates, the whole surface being broken up into a multiplicity of little whirlpools and cross-currents, all battling one against another in mad confusion. This is the result of unnecessary emotion and worries, the ordinary person of the West being a mass of these, through which much of his strength is frittered away. An astral body which vibrates 50 ways at once is not only ugly but also a serious annoyance. It may be compared to a physical body suffering from an aggravated form of palsy, with all its muscles jerking simultaneously in different directions. Such astral effects are contagious and affect all sensitive persons who approach, communicating a painful sense of unrest and worry. It is just because millions of people are thus unnecessarily agitated by all sorts of foolish desires and feelings that it is so difficult for a sensitive person to live in a great city or move amongst crowds. The perpetual astral disturbances may even react through the etheric double and set up nervous diseases. The centers of inflammation in the astral body are to it what boils are to the physical body, not only acutely uncomfortable, but also weak spots through which vitality leaks away. They also offer practically no resistance to evil influences, and prevent good influences from being of profit. This condition is painfully common. The remedy is to eliminate worry, fear and annoyance. The student of occultism must not have personal feelings that can be affected under any circumstances whatever. Only a young child has a white or comparatively colorless aura, the colors beginning to show only as the qualities develop. The astral body of a child is often a most beautiful object, pure and bright in its colors, free from the stains of sensuality, avarice, ill will, and selfishness. In it may also be seen lying latent the germs and tendencies brought over from his last life, see page 211, some of them evil, some good, and thus the possibilities of the child's future life may be seen. The yellow of intellect, found always near the head, is the origin of the idea of the nimbus or glory round the head of a saint, since this yellow is much the most conspicuous of the colors of the astral body, and the one most easily perceived by a person on the verge of clairvoyance. Sometimes, owing to the unusual activity of the intellect, the yellow may become visible even in physical matter, so as to be perceptible to ordinary physical sight. We have already seen that the astral body has a certain normal arrangement, into which its various portions tend to group themselves. A sudden rush of passion or feeling, however, may temporarily force the whole, or almost the whole, of the matter in an astral body to vibrate at a certain rate, thus producing quite striking results. All the matter of the astral body is swept about as if by a violent hurricane, so that for the time being the colors become very much mixed. Colored examples of this phenomenon are given in visible and invisible, sudden rush of affection, sudden rush of devotion, intense anger, shock of fear. In the case of a sudden wave of pure affection, when, for example, a mother snatches up her baby and covers it with kisses, the whole astral body in a moment is thrown into a violent agitation, and the original colors are for the time almost obscured. Analysis discovers 4 separate effects. 1. Certain coils or vortices of vivid color are to be seen, well-defined and solid-looking, and glowing with an intense light from within. Each of these is in reality a thought form of intense affection, generated within the astral body, and about to be poured forth from it towards the object of the feeling. The whirling clouds of living light are indescribably lovely, though difficult to depict. 2. The whole astral body is crossed by horizontal pulsating lines of crimson light, even more difficult to represent, by reason of the exceeding rapidity of their motion. 3. A kind of film of rose color covers the surface of the whole astral body, so that all within is seen through it, as through tinted glass. 4. A sort of crimson flush fills the entire astral body, tinging to some extent the other hues, and here and there condensing itself into irregular floating wisps, like half-formed clouds. This display would probably last only a few seconds, and then the body would rapidly resume its normal condition, the various grades of matter sorting themselves again into their usual zones by their specific gravities. Yet every such rush of feeling adds a little to the crimson in the higher part of the oval and makes it a little easier for the astral body to respond to the next wave of affection which may come. Similarly, a man who frequently feels high devotion soon comes to have a large area of blue in his astral body. The effects of such impulses are thus cumulative, and in addition the radiation of vivid vibrations of love and joy produce good influences on others. With the substitution of blue for crimson, a sudden access of devotion, surging over a nun engaged in contemplation, produces an almost identical effect. In the case of intense anger, the ordinary background of the astral body is obscured by coils or vortices of heavy, thunderous masses of sooty blackness, lit up from within by the lurid glare of active hatred. Wisps of the same dark cloud are to be seen defiling the whole astral body, while the fiery arrows of uncontrolled anger shoot among them like flashes of lightning. These terrible flashes are capable of penetrating other astral bodies like swords and thus inflicting injury upon other people. In this instance, as in the others, each outburst of rage would predispose the matter of the entire astral body to respond somewhat more readily than before to these very undesirable vibrations. A sudden shock of terror will in an instant suffuse the whole body with a curious livid gray mist, while horizontal lines of the same hue appear, but vibrating with such violence as to be hardly recognizable as separate lines. The result is indescribably ghastly. All light fades out for the time from the body and the whole gray mass quivers helplessly like a jelly. A flood of emotion does not greatly affect the mental body, though for a time it may render it almost impossible for any activity from the mental body to come through into the physical brain, because the astral body, which acts as a bridge between the mental body and the brain, is vibrating so entirely at one rate as to be incapable of conveying any undulation which is not in harmony with it. The above are examples of the effects of sudden and temporary outbursts of feeling. There are other somewhat similar effects of a more permanent character produced by certain dispositions or types of character. Thus, when an ordinary man falls in love, the astral body is so completely transformed as to make it scarcely recognizable as belonging to the same person. Selfishness, deceit, and avarice vanish, and the lowest part of the oval is filled with a large development of animal passions. The green of adaptability has been replaced by the peculiar brownish green of jealousy, and the extreme activity of this feeling is shown by bright scarlet flashes of anger which permeate it. But the undesirable changes are more than counterbalanced by the splendid band of crimson which fills so large a part of the oval. This is, for the time, a dominant characteristic, and the whole astral body glows with its light. Under its influence the general muddiness of the ordinary astral body has disappeared, and the hues are all brilliant and clearly marked, good and bad alike. It is an intensification of the life in various directions. The blue of devotion is also distinctly improved, and even a touch of pale violet appears at the summit of the ovoid, indicating a capacity of response to a really high and unselfish ideal. The yellow of intellect, however, has entirely vanished for the time, a fact which the cynical might consider as characteristic of the condition. The astral body of an irritable man usually shows a broad band of scarlet as a prominent feature, and, in addition, the whole astral body is covered with little floating flecks of scarlet, somewhat like notes of interrogation. In the case of a miser, avarice, selfishness, deceit, and adaptability are naturally intensified, but sensuality is diminished. The most remarkable change, however, is the curious series of parallel horizontal lines across the oval, giving the impression of a cage. The bars are a deep brown in color, almost burnt sienna. The vice of avarice seems to have the effect of completely arresting development for the time, and it is very difficult to shake off when once it has gained a firm hold. Deep depression produces an effect in gray, instead of brown, very similar to that of the miser. The result is indescribably gloomy and depressing to the observer. No emotional condition is more infectious than the feeling of depression. In the case of a non-intellectual man who is definitely religious, the astral body assumes a characteristic appearance. A touch of violet suggests the possibility of response to a high ideal. The blue of devotion is unusually well developed, but the yellow of intellect is scanty. There is a fair proportion of affection and adaptability, but more than the average of sensuality, and deceit and selfishness are also prominent. The colors are irregularly distributed, melting into one another, and the outline is vague, indicating the vagueness of the devotional man's conceptions. Extreme sensuality and the devotional temperament are frequently seen in association, perhaps because these types of men live chiefly in their feelings, being governed by them instead of trying to control them by reason. A great contrast is shown by a man of a scientific type. Devotion is entirely absent, sensuality is much below the average, but the intellect is developed to an abnormal degree. Affection and adaptability are small in quantity and poor in quality. A good deal of selfishness and avarice is present, and also some jealousy. A huge cone of bright orange in the midst of the golden yellow of intellect indicates pride and ambition in connection with the knowledge that has been acquired. The scientific and orderly habit of mind causes the arrangement of the colors to fall into regular bands, the lines of demarcation being quite definite and clearly marked. The student is urged to study for himself the admirable book from which the above information is taken, this being one of the most valuable of the many works produced by that great and gifted writer, C.W. Leadbeater. As we have been dealing here with colors in the astral body, it may be mentioned that the means of communication with the elementals, which are associated so closely with man's astral body, is by sounds and colors. Students may recollect obscure allusions now and again to a language of colors, and the fact that in ancient Egypt sacred manuscripts were written in colors, mistakes in copying being punished with death. To elementals, colors are as intelligible as words are to men. Chapter 4. Functions. The functions of the astral body may be roughly grouped under 3 headings. 1. To make sensation possible. 2. To serve as a bridge between mind and physical matter. 3. To act as an independent vehicle of consciousness and action. We will deal with these 3 functions in sequence. When man is analyzed into principles, i.e., into modes of manifesting life, the 4 lower principles, sometimes termed the lower quaternary, are physical body, etheric body, prana, or vitality, kama, or desire. The 4th principle, kama, is the life manifesting in the astral body and conditioned by it. Its characteristic is the attribute of feeling, which in rudimentary form is sensation, and in complex form emotion, with many grades in between these two. This is sometimes summed up as desire, that which is attracted or repelled by objects, according as they give pleasure or pain. Kama thus includes feelings of every kind, and might be described as the passional and emotional nature. It comprises all animal appetites, such as hunger, thirst, sexual desire, all passions, such as the lower forms of love, hatred, envy, jealousy. It is the desire for sentient existence, for experience of material joys, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life. Kama is the brute in us, the ape and tiger of Tennyson, the force which most avails to keep us bound to earth and to stifle in us all higher longings by the illusions of sense. It is the most material in man's nature, and is the one that binds him fast to earthly life. It is not molecularly constituted matter, least of all the human body, sthula sharira, that is the grossest of all our principles, but verily the middle principle, the real animal center, whereas our body is but its shell, the irresponsible factor and medium through which the beast in us acts all its life. Secret Doctrine, Volume 1, pages 280 and 281. Kama or desire is also described as a reflection or lower aspect of Atma or will, the distinction being that will is self-determined, whereas desire is moved to activity by attractions to or repulsions from surrounding objects. Desire is thus will disgrowned, the captive, the slave of matter. Another way of regarding Kama has been well expressed by Mr. Ernest Wood in his illuminating book The 7 Rays. Kama means all desire. And desire is the outward-turned aspect of love, the love of the things of the 3 worlds, while love proper is love of life and love of the divine, and belongs to the higher or inward-turned self. For our purposes in this book, desire and emotion are frequently used as practically synonymous. Strictly, however, emotion is the product of desire and intellect. The astral body is often known as the Kama Rupa, and sometimes, in the older nomenclature, as the animal soul. Impacts from without, striking on the physical body, are conveyed as vibrations by the agency of prana or vitality, but they would remain as vibrations only, merely motion on the physical plane, did not Kama, the principle of sensation, translate the vibration into feeling. Thus pleasure and pain do not arise until the astral center is reached. Hence Kama joined to prana is spoken of as the breath of life, the vital sentient principle spread over every particle of the body. It appears that certain organs of the physical body are specifically associated with the workings of Kama. Among these are the liver and the spleen. It may be noted here that Kama, or desire, is just beginning to be active in the mineral kingdom, where it expresses itself as chemical affinity. In the vegetable kingdom it is, of course, much more developed, indicating a far greater capacity of utilizing lower astral matter. Students of botany are aware that likes and dislikes, i.e., desire, are much more prominent in the vegetable world than in the mineral, and that many plants exhibit a great deal of ingenuity and sagacity in attaining their ends. Plants are quick to respond to loving care and are distinctly affected by man's feelings towards them. They delight in and respond to admiration. They are also capable of individual attachments, as well as of anger and dislike. Animals are capable to the fullest possible extent of experiencing the lower desires, though the capacity for the higher desires is more limited. Nevertheless, it exists, and in exceptional cases an animal is capable of manifesting an exceedingly high quality of affection or devotion. Passing now to the second function of the astral body, to act as a bridge between mind and physical matter, we note that an impact on the physical senses is transmitted inwards by prana, becomes a sensation by the action of the sense centers, which are situated in kama, and is perceived by manas, or mind. Thus, without the general action through the astral body there would be no connection between the external world and the mind of man, no connection between physical impacts and the perception of them by the mind. Conversely, whenever we think, we set in motion the mental matter within us, the vibrations thus generated are transferred to the matter of our astral body, the astral matter affects the etheric matter, this, in turn, acting on the dense physical matter, the gray matter of the brain. The astral body is thus veritably a bridge between our physical and our mental life, serving as a transmitter of vibrations both from physical to mental and from mental to physical, and is, in fact, principally developed by this constant passage of vibrations to and fro. In the course of the evolution of man's astral body, there are two distinct stages. The astral body has first to be developed to a fairly high point as a transmitting vehicle, then it has to be developed as an independent body, in which the man can function on the astral plane. In man, the normal brain intelligence is produced by the union of kama with manas, or mind, this union being often spoken of as kama manas. Kama manas is described by H. P. Blavatsky as the rational, but earthly or physical intellect of man, encased in, and bound by matter, and therefore subject to the influence of the latter. This is the lower self which, acting on this plane of illusion, imagines itself to be the real self or ego, and thus falls into what Buddhist philosophy terms the heresy of separateness. Kama manas, that is manas with desire, has also been picturesquely described as manas taking an interest in external things. It may, in passing, be noted that a clear understanding of the fact that kama manas belongs to the human personality, and that it functions in and through the physical brain, is essential to a just grasp of the process of reincarnation, and is sufficient of itself to show how there can be no memory of previous lives so long as the consciousness cannot rise beyond the brain mechanism, this mechanism, together with that of kama, being made afresh each life, and therefore having no direct touch with previous lives. Manas, of itself, could not affect the molecules of the physical brain cells, but, when united to kama, it is able to set the physical molecules in motion, and thus produce brain consciousness, including the brain memory and all the functions of the human mind, as we ordinarily know it. It is, of course, not the higher manas, but the lower manas, i.e., matter of the four lower levels of the mental plane, which is associated with kama. In Western psychology, this kama manas becomes a part of what in that system is termed mind. Kama manas, forming the link between the higher and lower nature in man, is the battleground during life, and also, as we shall see later, plays an important part in post-mortem existence. So close is the association of manas and kama that the Hindus speak of man having 5 sheaths, one of which is for all manifestations of working intellect and desire. These 5 are: 1. Anandamayasha, the bliss sheath buddhi. 2. Vijnanamaya kosha, the discriminating sheath higher manas, and kama, the sheath of intellect and lower manas. 3. Manomaya kosha, desire kama. 4. Pranamaya kosha, the vitality sheath prana. 5. Annamaya kosha, the food sheath dense physical body. In the division used by Manu, the pranamaya kosha and the annamaya kosha are classed together, and known as the Buddhatman or elemental self, or body of action. The Vijnanamaya kosha and the Manomaya kosha he terms the body of feeling, giving it the name jiva. He defines it as that body in which the knower, the kshatrajna, becomes sensible of pleasure and of pains. In their external relations, the Vijnanamaya kosha and the Manomaya kosha, especially the Manomaya kosha, are related to the Deva world. The Devas are said to have entered into man, the reference being to the presiding deities of the elements, see page 188. Those presiding deities give rise to sensations in men, changing the contacts from without into sensations, or the recognition of the contacts from within, this being essentially a deva action. Hence the link with all these lower devas, which, when supreme control has been obtained, makes man the master in every region of the universe. Manas, or mind, being unable, as said above, to affect the gross particles of the brain, projects a part of itself, i.e., lower manas, which clothes itself with astral matter, and then with the help of etheric matter permeates the whole nervous system of the child before birth. The projection from manas is often spoken of as its reflection, its shadow, its ray, and is known also by other allegorical names. H. P. Blavatsky writes, Key to Theosophy, page 184, once imprisoned, or incarnate, there, the manas, essence becomes dual, that is to say, the rays of the eternal divine mind, considered as individual entities, assume a twofold attribute, which is, a, their essential, inherent, characteristic, heaven-aspiring mind, higher manas, and, b, the human quality of thinking, of animal cogitation, rationalized owing to the superiority of the human brain, the kama-tending, or lower manas. Lower manas is thus engulfed in the quaternary, and may be regarded as clasping kama with one hand, whilst with the other it retains its hold on its father, the higher manas. Whether it will be dragged down by kama altogether and be torn away from the triad, Atma-buddhi manas, to which, by its nature it belongs, or whether it will triumphantly carry back to its source the purified experiences of its earth life, that is the life problem set and solved in each successive incarnation. This point will be considered further in the chapters on after-death life. Kama thus supplies the animal and passional elements, lower manas rationalizes these and adds the intellectual faculties. In men these two principles are interwoven during life and rarely act separately. Manas may be regarded as the flame, kama, and the physical brain as the wick and fuel which feed the flame. The egos of all men, developed or undeveloped, are of the same essence and substance, that which makes of one a great man, and of another a vulgar, silly person, is the quality and makeup of the physical body, and the ability of the brain and body to transmit and express the light of the real inner man. In brief, kama manas is the personal self of man, lower manas gives the individualizing touch that makes the personality recognize itself as I, lower manas is a ray from the immortal thinker, illuminating a personality. It is lower manas which yields the last touch of delight to the senses and to the animal nature, by conferring the power of anticipation, memory, and imagination. Whilst it would be out of place in this book to encroach too far into the domain of manas and the mental body, yet it may help the student at this stage to add that free will resides in manas, manas being the representative of Mahat, the universal mind. In physical man, the lower manas is the agent of free will. From manas comes the feeling of liberty, the knowledge that we can rule ourselves, that the higher nature can master the lower. To identify the consciousness with the manas, instead of with kama, is thus an important step on the road to self-mastery. The very struggle of manas to assert itself is the best testimony that it is by nature free. It is the presence and power of the ego which enables a man to choose between desires and to overcome them. As the lower manas rules kama, the lower quaternary takes its rightful position of subservience to the higher triad, Atma-buddhi manas. We may classify the principles of man in the following manner. Atma, buddhi immortal. Higher manas, kama manas conditionally immortal. Prana, etheric double mortal. Dense body. We come now to consider the third function of the astral body, as an independent vehicle of consciousness and action. The full treatment of this portion of our subject, the use, development, possibilities, and limitations of the astral body on its own plane, will be dealt with step by step in most of the succeeding chapters. For the present it will suffice to enumerate very briefly the principal ways in which an astral body can be used as an independent vehicle of consciousness. These are as follows. 1. During ordinary waking consciousness, i.e., while the physical brain and senses are wide awake, the powers of the astral senses may be brought into action. Some of these powers correspond to the senses and powers of action possessed by the physical body. They will be dealt with in the next chapter, on chakrams. 2. During sleep or trance it is possible for the astral body to separate itself from the physical body and to move about and function freely on its own plane. This will be dealt with in the chapter on sleep life. 3. It is possible so to develop the powers of the astral body that a man may consciously and deliberately, at any time that he chooses, leave the physical body and pass with unbroken consciousness into the astral body. This will be dealt with in the chapter on continuity of consciousness. 4. After physical death the consciousness withdraws itself into the astral body, and a life, varying greatly in intensity and duration, dependent upon a number of factors, may be led on the astral plane. This will be dealt with in the chapters on after-death life. These divisions of our subject, with numerous ramifications, will constitute the major portion of the remainder of this treatise. Chapter 5. Chakrams. The word chakram is Sanskrit, and means literally a wheel, or revolving disc. It is used to denote what are often called force centers in man. There are such chakrams in all man's vehicles, and they are points of connection at which force flows from one vehicle to another. They are also intimately associated with the powers or senses of the various vehicles. The chakrams of the etheric body are fully described in the etheric double, and the student is referred to that work, as a study of the etheric chakrams will materially assist him to understand the astral chakrams. The etheric chakrams are situated in the surface of the etheric double and are usually denoted by the name of the physical organ to which they correspond. They are 1. Base of spine chakram. 2. Navel chakram. 3. Spleen chakram. 4. Heart chakram. 5. Throat chakram. 6. Between the eyebrows chakram. 7. Top of the head chakram. There are also 3 lower chakrams, but as these are used only in certain schools of black magic, we are not concerned with them here. The astral chakrams, which are frequently in the interior of the etheric double, are vortices in 4 dimensions, see chapter 18, thus having an extension in a direction quite different from the etheric. Consequently, though they correspond to the etheric chakrams, they are by no means always coterminous with them, though some part is always coincident. The astral chakrams are given the same names as those in the etheric double, and their functions are as follows. 1. Base of spine chakram. This is the seat of the serpent fire, Kundalini, a force which exists on all planes and by means of which the rest of the chakrams are aroused. Originally, the astral body was an almost inert mass, possessing but the vaguest consciousness, with no definite power of doing anything, and with no clear knowledge of the world surrounding it. The first thing that happened was the awakening of Kundalini at the astral level. 2. Navel chakram. Kundalini having been awakened in the first chakram, it moved to the navel chakram, which it vivified, thus awakening in the astral body the power of feeling, a sensitiveness to all sorts of influences, though without as yet anything like the definite comprehension that comes from seeing and hearing. 3. Spleen chakram. Kundalini then moved to the spleen chakram, and through it vitalis the whole astral body, this chakram having as one of its functions the absorption of prana, the vitality force, which also exists on all planes. The vivification of the spleen chakram enables the man to travel in his astral body consciously, though with only a vague conception as yet of what he encounters on his journeys. 4. Heart chakram. This chakram enables the man to comprehend and sympathize with the vibrations of other astral entities, so that he can instinctively understand their feelings. 5. Throat chakram. This chakram confers the power in the astral world which corresponds to hearing in the physical world. 6. Between the eyebrows chakram. This chakram confers the power to perceive definitely the shape and nature of astral objects, instead of merely vaguely sensing their presence. Associated with this chakram appears also the power of magnifying at will the minutest physical or astral particle to any desired size, as though by a microscope. This power enables an occult investigator to perceive and study molecules, atoms, etc. The full control of this faculty, however, belongs rather to the causal body. The power of magnification is one of the siddhis described in Oriental books as the power of making oneself large or small at will. The description is apposite, because the method employed is that of using a temporary visual mechanism of inconceivable minuteness. Conversely, minification of vision may be obtained by the construction of a temporary and enormously larger visual mechanism. The power of magnification is quite distinct from the faculty of functioning on a higher plane, just as the power of an astronomer to observe planets and stars is quite a different thing from the ability to move or function amongst them. In the Hindu sutras it is stated that meditation in a certain part of the tongue will confer astral sight. The statement is a blind, the reference being to the pituitary body, situated just over this part of the tongue. 7. Top of the head chakram. This chakram rounds off and completes the astral life, endowing the man with the perfection of his faculties. There appear to be two methods in which this chakram works. In one type of man, the 6th and 7th chakrams both converge upon the pituitary body, this body being for this type practically the only direct link between the physical and the higher planes. In another type of man, however, while the 6th chakram is still attached to the pituitary body, the 7th chakram is bent or slanted until its vortex coincides with the pineal gland. In people of this type the pineal gland is thus vivified and made into a line of communication directly with the lower mental, without apparently passing through the intermediate astral plane in the ordinary way. In the physical body, as we know, there are specialized organs for each sense, the eye for seeing, the ear for hearing, and so on. In the astral body, however, this is not the case. The particles of the astral body are constantly flowing and swirling about like those of boiling water. Consequently, there are no special particles which remain continuously in any of the chakrams. On the contrary, all the particles of the astral body pass through each of the chakrams. Each chakram has the function of awakening a certain power of response in the particles, which flow through it, one chakram the power of sight, another that of hearing, and so on. Consequently, any one astral sense is not, strictly speaking, localized or confined to any particular part of the astral body. It is rather the whole of the particles of the astral body which possess the power of response. A man, therefore, who has developed astral sight uses any part of the matter of his astral body in order to see, and so can see equally well objects in front, behind, above, below, or to either side. Similarly with all the other senses. In other words, the astral senses are equally active in all parts of the body. It is not easy to describe the substitute for language by means of which ideas are communicated astrally. Sound in the ordinary sense of the word is not possible in the astral world, in fact it is not possible even in the higher part of the physical world. It would also not be correct to say that the language of the astral world is thought transference. The most that could be said is that it is the transference of thoughts formulated in a particular way. In the mental world, although is instantaneously transmitted to the mind of another without any form of words, therefore in the mental world language does not in the least matter. But astral communications lies, as it were, halfway between the thought transference of the mental world and the concrete speech of the physical, and it is still necessary to formulate the thought in words. For this exchange it is therefore necessary that the two parties should have a language in common. The astral and etheric chakrams are in very close correspondence, but between them, and interpenetrating them in a manner which is not readily describable, there is a sheath or web of closely woven texture, composed of a single layer of physical atoms much compressed and permeated by a special form of prana. The divine life which normally descends from the astral body to the physical is so attuned as to pass through the shield with perfect ease, but it is an absolute barrier to all the forces which cannot use the atomic matter of both planes. The web is natural protection to prevent a premature opening up of communication between the planes, a development which could lead to nothing but injury. It is this which normally prevents clear recollection of the sleep life, and which also causes the momentary unconsciousness which always occurs at death. But for this provision the ordinary man could at any moment be brought by any astral entity under the influence of forces with which he could not possibly cope. He would be liable to constant obsession by astral entities desirous of seizing his vehicles. The web may be injured in several ways. 1. A great shock of the astral body, e.g., a sudden fright, may rend apart this delicate organism and, as it is commonly expressed, drive the man mad. A tremendous outburst of anger may also produce the same effect, as may any other very strong emotion of an evil character which produces a kind of explosion in the astral body. 2. The use of alcohol or narcotic drugs, including tobacco. These substances contain matter which on breaking up volatilizes, some of it passing from the physical to the astral plane. Even tea and coffee contain this matter, but only in infinitesimal quantities, so that only long-continued abuse of them would produce the effect. These constituents rush through the chakras in the opposite direction to that for which they are intended, and in doing this repeatedly they seriously injure and finally destroy the delicate web. This deterioration or destruction may take place in two ways, according to the type of person concerned and to the proportion of the constituents in his etheric and astral bodies. In one type of person the rush of volatilizing matter actually burns away the web, and therefore leaves the door open to all sorts of irregular forces and evil influences. Those affected in this way fall into delirium tremens, obsession of insanity. In the other type of person, the volatile constituents, in flowing through, somehow harden the atom so that its pulsation is to a large extent checked and crippled, and it is no longer capable of being vitalized by the particular type of prana which welds it into a web. This results in a kind of ossification of the web, so that instead of too much coming through from one plane to another, we have very little of any kind coming through. Such subjects tend to a general deadening down of their qualities, resulting in gross materialism, brutality, and animalism, in the loss of all finer feelings and of the power to control themselves. This type is said to be very common amongst slaves of the tobacco habit. All impressions which pass from one plane to the other are intended to come only through the atomic subplanes, but when the deadening process takes place it infects not only other atomic matter, but even matter of the second and third subplanes, so that the only communication between the astral and the etheric is from the lower subplanes, upon which only unpleasant and evil influences are to be found. The consciousness of the ordinary man cannot yet use pure atomic matter, either of the physical or astral, and therefore there is normally for him no possibility of conscious communication at will between the two planes. The proper way to obtain it is to purify the vehicles until the atomic matter in both is fully vivified, so that all communications between the two may pass by that road. In that case the web retains to the fullest degree its position and activity, and yet is no longer a barrier to the perfect communication, while it still continues to prevent close contact with the lower and undesirable subplanes. 3. The third way in which the web may be injured is that known in spiritualistic parlance as sitting for development. It is quite possible, in fact very common, for a man to have his astral chakras well developed, so that he is able to function freely on the astral plane, and yet he may recollect nothing of his astral plane when he returns to waking consciousness. With this phenomenon and its explanation we shall deal more appropriately in the chapter on dreams. Chapter 6. Kundalini. The student is referred to the etheric double for a description of Kundalini with special reference to the etheric body and its chakras. Here we are concerned with it in connection with the astral body. The three known forces which emanate from the logos are 1. Fohat, which shows itself as electricity, heat, light motion, etc. 2. Prana, which shows itself as vitality. 3. Kundalini, also known as the serpent fire. Each of these three forces exists on all planes of which we know anything. So far as is known, no one of the three is convertible into any of the others, they each remain separate and distinct. Kundalini is called in the voice of the silence, the fiery power, and the world's mother. The first, because it appears like liquid fire as it rushes through the body, and the course it should follow is a spiral one, like the coils of a serpent. It is called the world's mother because through it our various vehicles may be vivified, so that the higher worlds may open before us in succession. Its home in man's body is the chakram at the base of the spine, and for the ordinary man it lies there unawakened and unsuspected during the whole of his life. It is far better for it to remain dormant until the man has made definite moral development, until his will is strong enough to control it and his thoughts pure enough to enable him to face its awakening without injury. No one should experiment with it without definite instruction from a teacher who thoroughly understands the subject, for the dangers connected with it are very real and terribly serious. Some of them are purely physical. Its uncontrolled movement often produces intense physical pain, and it may readily tear tissues, and even destroy physical life. It may also do permanent injury to vehicles higher than the physical. One very common effect of rousing it prematurely is that it rushes downwards in the body instead of upwards, and thus excites the most undesirable passions, excites them and intensifies their effects to such a degree that it becomes quite impossible for the man to resist them, because a force has been brought into play in whose presence he is quite helpless. Such men become satyrs, monsters of depravity, the force being beyond the normal human power of resistance. They may probably gain certain supernormal powers, but these will be such as will bring them into touch with a lower order of evolution, with which humanity is intended to hold no commerce, and to escape from its thraldom may take more than one incarnation. There is a school of black magic which purposely uses this power in this way, in order that through it may be vivified those lower chakrams which are never used by followers of the good law. The premature unfoldment of Kundalini has other unpleasant possibilities. It intensifies everything in the man's nature, and it reaches the lower and evil qualities more readily than the good. In the mental body, ambition is very readily aroused, and soon swells to an incredibly inordinate degree. It would probably bring with it a great intensification of intellect, accompanied by abnormal and satanic pride, such as is quite inconceivable to the ordinary man. An uninstructed man who finds that Kundalini has been aroused by accident should at once consult someone who fully understands these matters. The arousing of Kundalini, the method of doing which is not publicly known, and the attempt to pass it through the chakrams, the order of which is also deliberately concealed from the public, should never be attempted except at the express suggestion of a master, who will watch over his pupil during the various stages of the experiment. The most solemn warnings are given by experienced occultists against in any way attempting to arouse Kundalini, except under qualified tuition, because of the real and great dangers involved. As is said in the Hatha Yoga Pradipika, it gives liberation to yogis and bondage to fools. In some cases Kundalini wakes spontaneously, so that a dull glow is felt. It may even begin to move of itself, though this rare. In this latter case it would be likely to cause great pain, as, since the passages are not prepared for it, it would have to clear its way by actually burning up a great deal of etheric dross, which is necessarily a painful process. When it thus awakes of itself or is accidentally aroused, it usually tries to rush up the interior of the spine, instead of following the spiral course into which the occultist is trained to guide it. If it be possible, the will should be set in motion to arrest its onward rush, but if that proves to be impossible, as is most likely, no alarm need be felt. It will probably rush out through the head and escape into the surrounding atmosphere, and it is likely that no harm will result beyond a slight weakening. Nothing worse than a temporary loss of consciousness need be apprehended. The worst dangers are connected, not with its upward rush, but with its turning downwards and inwards. Its principal function in connection with occult development is that by being sent through the chakrams in the etheric body, it vivifies these chakras between the physical and astral bodies. It is said in the voice of the silence that when Kundalini reaches the center between the eyebrows and fully vivifies it, it confers the power of hearing the voice of the master, which means, in this case, the voice of the ego or higher self. The reason is that when the pituitary body is brought into working order it forms a perfect link with the astral vehicle, so that through it all communications from within can be received. In addition, all the higher chakrams have to be awakened, in due course, and each must be made responsive to all kinds of astral influences from the various astral subplanes. Most people cannot gain this during the present incarnation, if it is the first in which they have begun to take these matters seriously in hand. Some Indians might succeed in doing so, as their bodies are by heredity more adaptable than most others, but it is for the majority of men the work of a later round altogether. The conquest of Kundalini has to be repeated in each incarnation, since the vehicles are new each time, but after it has been once achieved, these repetitions will be an easy matter. Its action will vary with different types of people. Some would see the higher self rather than hear its voice. Also, this connection with the higher has many stages. For the personality it means the influence of the ego, but for the ego himself it means the power of the monad, and for the monad in turn it means to become a conscious expression of the logos. There does not appear to be any age limit with regard to the arousing of Kundalini, but physical health is a necessity owing to the strain involved. An ancient symbol was the thyrsus, that is, a staff with a pie cone on its top. In India the same symbol is found, but instead of the staff, a stick of bamboo with 7 knots is used. In some modifications of the mysteries a hollow iron rod, said to contain fire, was used instead of the thyrsus. The staff, or stick, with 7 knots represents the spinal cord, with its 7 chakrams. The hidden fire is, of course, Kundalini. The thyrsus was not only a symbol, but also an object of practical use. It was a very strong magnetic instrument, used by initiates to free the astral body from the physical when they passed in full consciousness to this higher life. The priest who had magnetized it laid it against the spinal cord of the candidate and gave him in that way some of his own magnetism, to help him in that difficult life and in the efforts which lay before him. Chapter 7. Thought Forms. The mental and astral bodies are those chiefly concerned with the production of what are called thought forms. The term thought form is not wholly accurate, because the forms produced may be composed of mental matter, or, in the vast majority of cases, of both astral and mental matter. Although in this book we are dealing primarily with the astral, and not with the mental body, yet thought forms, as just said, are, in a vast majority of cases, both astral and mental. In order, therefore, to make the subject intelligible, it is necessary to deal very largely with the mental as well as with the astral aspect of the subject. A purely intellectual and impersonal thought, such as one concerned with algebra or geometry, would be confined to mental matter. It, on the other hand, the thought has in it something of selfish or personal desire, it will draw round itself astral matter in addition to the mental. If, furthermore, the thought be of a spiritual nature, if it be tinged with love and aspiration or deep and unselfish feeling, then there may also enter in some of the splendor and glory of the Buddhic plane. Every definite thought produces 2 effects: first, a radiating vibration; second, a floating form. The vibration set up in and radiating from the mental body is accompanied with a play of color which has been described as like that in the spray of a waterfall as the sunlight strikes it, raised to the nth degree of color and vivid delicacy. This radiating vibration tends to reproduce its own rate of motion in any mental body on which it may impinge, to produce thoughts of the same type as those from which the vibration originated. It should be noted that the radiating vibration carries, not the subject of the thought, but its character. Thus, the waves of thought emotion radiating from a Hindu sitting wrapped in devotion to Sri Krishna would tend to stimulate devotional feeling in any who came under its influence, not necessarily towards Sri Krishna, but, in the case of a Christian, to the Christ, in the case of a Buddhist, to the Lord Buddha, and so on. The power of the vibration to produce such effects depends principally upon the clearness and definiteness of the thought emotion, as well, of course, as upon the amount of force put into it. These radiating vibrations become less effective in proportion to the distance from their source, though it is probable that the variation is proportional to the cube of the distance instead of, as with gravitation and other physical forces, to the square, because of the additional, 4th, dimension involved. The distance to which a thought wave can radiate effectively also depends upon the opposition with which it meets. Waves in the lower types of astral matter are usually soon deflected or overwhelmed by a multitude of other vibrations at the same level, just as a soft sound is drowned in the roar of a city. The second effect, that of a floating form, is caused by the mental body throwing off a vibrating portion of itself shaped by the nature of the thought, which gathers round itself matter of the corresponding order of fineness from the surrounding elemental essence, see page 6, of the mental plane. This is a thought form pure and simple, being composed of mental matter only. If made of the finer kinds of matter, it will be of great power and energy, and may be used as a most potent agent when directed by a strong and steady will. When the man directs his energy towards external objects of desire, or is occupied with passional or emotional activities, a similar process takes place in his astral body. A portion of it is thrown off and gathers round itself elemental essence of the astral plane. Such thought-desire forms are caused by kama manas, the mind under the dominion of the animal nature, manas dominated by kama. Such a thought-desire form has for its body the elemental essence, and for its animating soul, as it were, the desire or passion which threw it forth. Both these thought-desire forms, and also purely mental thought forms, are called artificial elementals. The vast majority of ordinary thought forms are of the former type, as few thoughts of ordinary men and women are untinged with desire, passion, or emotion. Both mental and astral elemental essence, which possess a half-intelligence life of their own, respond very readily to the influence of human thought and desire. Consequently, every impulse sent out, either from a man's mental body or from his astral body, is immediately clothed in a temporary vehicle of elemental essence. These artificial elementals thus become for the time a kind of living creature, entities of intense activity animated by the one idea that generated them. They are, in fact, often mistaken by untrained psychics or clairvoyants for real living entities. Thus, when a man thinks of a concrete object, a book, house, landscape, etc., he builds a tiny image of the object in the matter of his mental body. This image floats in the upper part of that body, usually in front of the face of the man, and at about the level of the eyes. It remains there as long as the man is contemplating the object, and usually for a little time afterwards, the length of life depending upon the intensity and the clearness of the thought. The form is quite objective and can be seen by another person possessed of mental sight. If a man thinks of another person, he creates a tiny portrait in just the same way. Thought forms have been usefully compared to a Leyden jar, a vessel charged with static electricity, the jar itself corresponding to the elemental essence and the electric charge to the thought emotion. And just as a Leyden jar when it touches another object discharges its stored electricity into that object, so does an artificial elemental, when it strikes a mental or astral body, discharge its stored mental and emotional energy into that body. The principles which underlie the production of all thought-emotion forms are: 1. Color is determined by the quality of the thought or emotion. 2. Form is determined by the nature of the thought or emotion. 3. Clearness of outline is determined by the definiteness of the thought or emotion. The life period of a thought form depends upon 1. Its initial intensity, 2. The nutriment afterwards supplied to it by a repetition of the thought, either by the generator or by others. Its life may be continually reinforced by this repetition, a thought which is brooded over acquiring great stability of form. So again, thought forms of similar character are attracted to and mutually strengthen each other, making a form of great energy and intensity. Furthermore, such a thought form appears to possess instinctive desire to prolong its life, and will react on its creator, tending to evoke from him renewal of the feeling which created it. It will react in a similar, though not so perfect, manner on any others with whom it may come into contact. The colors in which thought forms express themselves are identical with the colors found in the aura. The brilliance and department of the colors are usually a measure of the strength and the activity of the feeling. For our present purpose we may classify thought forms into 3 kinds: 1. Those connected solely with their originator; 2. Those connected with another person; 3. those not definitely personal. If a man's thought is about himself, or based on a personal feeling, as the vast majority of thoughts are, the form will hover in the immediate neighborhood of its generator. Any time, then, when he is in a passive condition, his thoughts and feelings not being specifically occupied, his own thought form will return to him and discharge itself upon him. In addition, each man also serves as a magnet to draw towards himself the thought forms of others similar to his own, thus attracting towards himself reinforcements of energy from outside. People who are becoming sensitive have sometimes imagined, in such cases, that they have been tempted by the devil, whereas it is their own thoughts' desire forms which are the cause of the temptation. Long brooding over the same subject may create a thought form of tremendous power. Such a form may last for many years and have for a time all the appearance and powers of real living entity. Most men move through life enclosed literally within a cage of their own building, surrounded by masses of forms created by their habitual thoughts. One important effect of this is that each man looks out upon the world through his own thought forms, and thus sees everything tinged by them. Thus a man's own thought forms react upon him, tending to reproduce themselves and thus setting up definite habits of thought and feeling, which may be helpful if of a lofty character, but are often cramping and a hindrance to growth, obscuring the mental vision and facilitating the formation of prejudice and fixed moods or attitudes which may develop into definite vices. As a master has written, man is continually peopling his current in space with a world of his own, crowed with the offspring of his fancies, desires, impulses and passions. These thought forms remain in his aura, increasing in number and intensity, until certain kinds of them so dominate his mental and emotional life that the man rather answers to their, page 48, impulse than decides anew. Thus are habits, the outer expression of his stored-up force, created, and thus his character built. Moreover, as each man leaves behind him a trail of thought forms, it follows that as we go along a street we are walking amidst a sea of other men's thoughts. If a man leaves his mind blank for a time, these thoughts of others drift through it. If one happens to attract his attention, his mind seizes upon it, makes it its own, strengthening it by the addition of its force, and then casts it out again to affect somebody else. A man, therefore, is not responsible for a thought which floats into his mind, but he is responsible if he takes it up, dwells upon it, and then sends it out again strengthened. An example of thought forms is that of the shapeless clouds of heavy blue which may often be seen rolling along like wreaths of dense smoke over the heads of the congregation of a church. In churches when the level of spirituality is a low one, the minds of the men may create rows of figures, representing their calculations of business deals or speculations, while the minds of the women may create pictures of millinery, jewelry, etc. Hypnotism provides another example of thought forms. The operator may make a thought form and project it onto blank paper, where it may become visible to his hypnotized subject, or he may make the form so objective that the subject will see and feel it as though it were an actual physical object. The literature of hypnotism is full of such examples. If the thought form is directed towards another person, it will go to that person. Either of two effects may then result. 1. If in the aura of the person concerned there is material capable of responding sympathetically to the vibration of the thought form, then the thought form will remain near the person, or even in his aura, and, as opportunity serves, automatically discharge itself, thus tending to strengthen in the person that particular rate of vibration. If the person at whom a thought form is aimed happens to be busy, or already engaged in some definite train of thought, the thought form, being unable to discharge itself into the man's mental body, which is already vibrating at a certain determinate rate, hangs in the vicinity until the man's mental body is sufficiently at rest to permit its entrance, when it immediately discharges itself. In doing this it will display what appears like a very considerable amount of intelligence and adaptability, though really it is a force acting along the line of least resistance, pressing steadily in one direction all the time, and taking advantage of any channel that it can find. Such elementals can, of course, be strengthened and their life period extended by repetition of the same thought. 2. If, on the other hand, there is in the person's aura no matter capable of response, then the thought form cannot affect it at all. It will therefore rebound from it, with a force proportional to the energy with which impinged upon it, and return to and strike its creator. Thus, for example, the thought of the desire for drink could not enter the body of a purely temperate man. It would strike upon his astral body, but it could not penetrate, and it would then return to the sender. The old saying that curses, to which might be added blessings, come home to roost, conveys this truth and explains cases where, as many have known, evil thoughts directed to a good and highly advanced man affect such a man not at all, but react, sometimes with terrible and devastating effect, on their creator. Hence also the obvious corollary that a pure heart and mind are the best protection against inimical assaults of feeling and thought. On the other hand, a thought form of love and of desire to protect, strongly directed to some beloved objects, acts as a shielding and protecting agent. It will seek all opportunities to serve and defend, will strengthen friendly forces and weaken unfriendly ones that impinge on the aura. It may protect its objects from impurity, irritability, fear, etc. Friendly thoughts and earnest good wishes thus create and maintain what is practically a guardian angel, always at the side of the person thought of, no matter where he may be. Many a mother's thoughts and prayers, for example, have given assistance and protection to her child. They may often be seen by clairvoyance, and in rare cases they may even materialize and become physically visible. It is thus apparent that a thought of love sent from one person to another involves the actual transference of a certain amount both of force and of matter from the sender to the recipient. If the thought is sufficiently strong, distance makes absolutely no difference to it, but a weak and diffuse thought is not effective outside a limited area. A variant of our first group consists of those cases where a man thinks strongly of himself in a distant place. The form thus created contains a large proportion of mental matter, takes the image of the thinker, and is at first small and compressed. It draws around itself a considerable amount of astral matter and usually expands to life size before it appears at its destination. Such forms are often seen by clairvoyants, and not infrequently are mistaken for the man's astral body or even for the man himself. When this takes place, the thought or desire must be sufficiently strong to do one of three things: 1. To call up by mesmeric influence the image of the thinker in the mind of the person to whom he wishes to appear; 2. By the same power to stimulate for the moment that person's psychic faculties so that he is able to see the astral visitor; 3. To produce a temporary materialization which will be physically visible. Apparitions at the time of death, which are by no means uncommon, are very often really the astral form of the dying man, but they may also be thought forms called into being by his earnest wish to see some friend before he passes on. In some instances the visitor is perceived just after the moment of death, instead of just before, but for various reasons this form of apparition is far less frequent than the other. A family ghost may be 1. A thought form, 2. An unusually vivid impression in the astral light, or 3. A genuine earthbound ancestor still haunting some particular place. In this connection, it may be added that wherever any intense passion has been felt, such as terror, pain, sorrow, hatred, etc., so powerful an impression is made on the astral light that persons with but a faint glimmer of psychic faculty may be impressed by it. A slight temporary increase of sensibility would enable a man to visualize the entire scene, hence many stories of haunted places, and of the unpleasant influences of such spots as Tyburn Tree, the Chamber of Horrors at Madame Tussauds, etc. Apparitions at the spot where a crime was committed are usually thought forms projected by the criminal who, whether living or dead, but most especially when dead, is perpetually thinking over again and again the circumstances of his actions. Since these thoughts are naturally specially vivid in his mind on the anniversary of his crime, it may happen that the thought form is strong enough to materialize itself so as to be visible to physical sight, thus accounting for many cases where the manifestation is periodical. Similarly, a jewel, which has been the cause of many crimes, may retain the impressions of the passions prompting the crimes, with unimpaired clearness, for many thousands of years, and continue to radiate them. A thought of phenomenal energy and concentration, whether it be a blessing or a curse, calls into being an elemental which is practically a living storage battery with a kind of clockwork attachment. It can be arranged to discharge itself regularly at a certain hour daily, or upon a certain anniversary, or its discharge may be contingent upon certain occurrences. Many instances of this class of elemental are on record, particularly in the Highlands of Scotland, where physical warnings occur before the death of a member of the family. In these cases it is usually the powerful thought form of an ancestor which gives the warning, according to the intention with which it was charged. A sufficiently strong wish, a concentrated effort of intense love or envenomed hate, would create such an entity once for all, an entity which would then be quite disconnected from its creator, and would carry on its appointed work entirely irrespective of later intentions and desire on his part. Mere repentance could not recall it or prevent its action any more than repentance could stop a bullet once discharged. Its power could be to a considerable extent neutralized only by sending after it thoughts of a contrary tendency. Occasionally an elemental of this class, being unable to expend its force either upon its object or its creator, may become a kind of wandering demon, and be attracted by any person who harbors similar feelings. If sufficiently powerful, it may even seize upon and inhabit a passing shell, see page 171, in which it is able to husband its resources more carefully. In this form it may manifest through a medium, and, by masquerading as a well-known friend, may obtain influence over people upon whom it would otherwise have little hold. Such elementals, whether formed consciously or unconsciously, which have become wandering demons, invariably seek to prolong their life, either by feeding like vampires upon the vitality of human beings, or by influencing them to make offerings to them. Among simple half-savage tribes they have frequently succeeded in getting themselves recognized as village or family gods. The less objectionable types may be content with offerings of rice and cooked foods. The lowest and most loathsome class demand blood sacrifices. Both varieties exist today in India, and in greater numbers in Africa. By drawing mainly upon the vitality of their devotees, and also upon the nourishment they can obtain from the offerings, they may prolong their existence for years, or even centuries. They may even perform occasional phenomena of a mild type in order to stimulate the faith and zeal of their followers, and they invariably make themselves unpleasant in some way or other if the sacrifices are neglected. The black magicians of Atlantis, the lords of the dark face, seems to have specialized in this type of artificial elementals, some of which, it is hinted, may have kept themselves in existence even to this day. The terrible Indian goddess, Kali, may well be a relic of this type. The vast majority of thought forms are simply copies or images of people or other material objects. They are formed first within the mental body and then pass outwards and remain suspended before the man. This applies to anything about which one may be thinking, persons, houses, landscapes, or anything else. A painter, for example, builds out of the matter of his mental body a conception of his future picture, projects it into space in front of him, keeps it before his mind's eye, and copies it. This thought and emotion form persists and may be regarded as the unseen counterpart of the picture, radiating out its own vibrations and affecting all who come within its influence. Similarly, a novelist builds in mental matter images of his characters, and then, by his will, moves these puppets from one position or grouping to another, so that the plot of the story is literally acted out before him. A curious effect arises in such a case. A playful nature spirit, see chapter 20, may ensoul the images and cause them to do things other than those which the author intended them to. More frequently, a dead writer may perceive the images and, being still interested in the craft of writing, may mold the characters and influence their actions according to his own ideas. The actual writer thus often finds his plots working themselves out according to a plan quite different from his original conception. In reading a book, it is possible for a genuine student, with attention fully concentrated, to get into touch with the original thought form which represents the author's conception as he wrote. Through the thought form the author himself may even be reached, and additional information thus obtained, or light gained on difficult points. There are in the mental and astral worlds many renderings of well-known stories, each nation usually having its special presentation, with the characters dressed in its own particular national garb. There thus exist excellent and lifelike thought forms of people like Sherlock Holmes, Captain Kettle, Robinson Crusoe, Shakespeare's characters, etc. In fact, there are on the astral plane vast numbers of thought forms of a comparatively permanent character, often the result of the cumulative work of generations of people. Many of these refer to alleged religious history, and the sight of them by sensitive people is responsible for many quite genuine accounts given by untrained seers and seeresses. Any great historical event, having been constantly thought of, and vividly imaged by large numbers of people, exists as a definite thought form on the mental plane, and wherever there is any strong emotion connected with it, it is materialized also in astral matter and consequently can be seen by a clairvoyant. The above applies equally, of course, to scenes and situations in fiction, drama, etc. Considered in the mass, it is easy to realize the tremendous effect that these thought forms or artificial elementals have in producing national and race feelings, and thus in biasing and prejudicing the mind, for thought forms of a similar kind have a tendency to aggregate together and form a kind of collective entity. We see everything through this atmosphere, every thought is more or less refracted by it, and our own astral bodies are vibrating in accord with it. As most people are receptive rather than initiative in their nature, they act almost as automatic reproducers of the thoughts which reach them, and thus the national atmosphere is continually intensified. This fact obviously explains many of the phenomena of crowd consciousness, see Chapter 25. The influence of these aggregated thought forms extends still further. Thought forms of a destructive type act as a disruptive agent and often precipitate havoc on the physical plane, causing accidents, natural convulsions, storms, earthquakes, floods, or crime, disease, social upheavals and wars. It is possible also for dead people and other non-human entities, such as mischievous nature spirits, see page 181, for example, to enter and vivify these thought images. The trained seer has to learn to distinguish the thought form, even when vivified, from the living being, and prominent facts of the astral world from the temporary molds into which they are cast. Our third class of thought-emotion forms consists of those which are not directly connected with any natural objects, and which therefore express themselves in forms entirely their own, displaying their inherent qualities in the matter which they draw around themselves. In this group, therefore, we have a glimpse of the forms natural to the astral and mental planes. Thought forms of this class almost invariably manifest themselves on the astral plane, as the vast majority of them are expressions of feeling as well as of thought. Such a form simply floats detached in the atmosphere, all the times radiating vibrations similar to those originally sent forth by its creator. If it does not come into contact with any other mental body, the radiation gradually exhausts its store of energy and the form then falls to pieces, but if it succeeds in awakening sympathetic vibrations in any mental body near at hand, an attraction is set up, and the thought form is usually absorbed by that mental body. From the above we see that the influence of a thought form is less far-reaching than that of a thought vibration, but it acts with much greater precision. A thought vibration reproduces thoughts of an order similar to that which gave it birth. A thought form reproduces the same thought. The radiations may affect thousands and stir in them thoughts of the same level as the original, though none of them may be identical with it. The thought form can affect only very few, but in those few cases it will reproduce exactly the initiatory idea. For pictorial, colored illustrations of many kinds of thought and emotion forms, the student is referred to the classic work on the subject, Thought Forms, by Annie Besant and C. W. Leadbeater. This whole chapter, indeed, is largely a condensed summary of the principles enunciated in that work. Vague thoughts or feelings show themselves as vague clouds. Definite thought or feelings create clearly defined forms. Thus a form of definite affection directed to a particular individual shapes itself not unlike a projectile. A thought of protective affection becomes somewhat like a bird, with a central portion of yellow and two wing-shaped projections of rose pink. a thought of universal love becomes a rose-pink sun with rays in every direction. Thoughts in which selfishness or greed are prominent usually take a hooked form, the hooks in some case actually clawing round the object desired. As a general principle, the energy of a selfish thought moves in a closed curve, and thus inevitably returns and expends itself upon its own level. An absolutely unselfish thought or feeling, however, rushes forth in an open curve, and thus does not return, in the ordinary sense, but pierces through into the plane above, because only in that higher condition, with its additional dimension, can it find room for its expansion. But, in thus breaking through, such a thought or feeling opens a door, as we might say symbolically, of dimension equivalent to its diameter, and thus provides a channel through which the higher planes can pour themselves into the lower, often with wonderful results, as in the case of prayer, both for the thinker and for others. Herein lies the highest and best part of the belief in answers to prayer. On the higher planes there is an infinite flood of force always ready and waiting to be poured through when a channel is offered. A thought of perfectly unselfish devotion provides such a channel, the grandest and noblest part of such a thought ascending to the Logos himself. The response from him is a descent of the divine life, resulting in a great strengthening and uplifting of the maker of the channel, and the spreading all about him of a powerful and beneficent influence, which flows through the reservoir that exists on the higher planes for the helping of mankind. It is this adding to the reservoir of spiritual force which is the truth in the Catholic idea of works of supererogation. The Nirmanakas are especially associated with this great reservoir of force. Meditation upon a master makes a link with him, which shows itself to clairvoyant vision as a kind of line of light. The master always subconsciously feels the impinging of such a line, and sends out along it in response a steady stream of magnetism which continues to play long after the meditation is over. Regularity in such meditation is a very important factor. A thought of definite, well-sustained devotion may assume a form closely resembling a flower, whilst devotional aspiration will create a blue cone, the apex pointing upwards. Such thought forms of devotion are often exceedingly beautiful, varying much in outline, but characterized by curved upward-pointing petals like azure flames. It is possible that the flower-like characteristic of devotion forms may have led to the custom of offering flowers in religious worship, the flowers suggesting the forms visible to astral sight. Intense curiosity, or desire to know, takes the form of a yellow snake, explosive anger or irritation, of a splash of red and orange, sustained anger, of a sharp, red stiletto, spiteful jealousy shows itself as a brownish snake. Forms produced by people who have mind and emotion well under control and definitely trained in meditation are clear, symmetrical objects of great beauty, often taking well-known geometrical forms, such as triangles, two triangles interlaced, five-pointed stars, hexagons, crosses, and so on, these indicating thoughts concerned with cosmic order, or metaphysical concepts. The power of the united thought of a number of people is always far more than the sum of their separate thoughts, it would be more nearly represented by their product. Music also produces forms which are perhaps not technically thought forms, unless we take them, as we well may, as the result of the thought of the composer, expressed by the skill of the musician through his instrument. These music forms will vary according to the type of music, the kind of instrument which plays it, and the skill and merits of the performer. The same piece of music will, if accurately played, always build the same form, but that form will, when played on a church organ or by an orchestra, be enormously larger than, as well as of different texture from that produced when played upon a piano. There will also be a difference in texture between the result of a piece of music played upon a violin and the same piece executed upon a flute. There is also a wide difference between the radiant beauty of the form produced by a true artist, perfect expression and execution, and the relatively dull effect produced by a wooden and mechanical player. Music forms may remain as coherent erections for a considerable time, an hour or two at least, and during all that time they are radiating their characteristics vibrations in every direction, just as thought forms do. In thought forms 3 colored examples are given, of music forms built by music of Mendelssohn, of Gounod, and of Wagner respectively. The forms which are built vary much with different composers. An overture by Wagner makes a magnificent whole, as though he built with mountains of flame for stones. One of Bach's fugues builds up an ordered form, bold yet precise, rugged but symmetrical, with parallel rivulets of silver and gold or ruby running through it, marking the successive appearances of the motif. One of Mendelssohn's Lieber Ohne Wort makes an airy erection, like a castle of filigree work in frosted silver. These forms, created by the performers of the music, are quite distinct from the thought forms made by the composer himself, which often persist for many years, even for centuries, if he is so far understood and appreciated that his original conception is strengthened by the thoughts of his admirers. Similar edifices are constructed by a poet's idea of his epic, or a writer's conception of his subject. Sometimes crowds of nature spirits, see page 181, may be seen admiring the music, forms and bathing in the waves of influence which they send forth. In studying pictorial representations of thought forms, it is important to bear in mind that thought forms are four-dimensional objects. It is therefore a practical impossibility to describe them adequately in words which pertain to our ordinary three-dimensional experiences, still less to portray them in two-dimensional pictures on paper. Students of the fourth dimension will realize that the most that can be done is to represent a section of the four-dimensional forms. It is remarkable, and possibly deeply significant fact, that many of the higher types of thought forms assume shapes closely resembling vegetable and animal forms. We thus have at least a presumption that the forces of nature work along lines somewhat similar to those along which thought and emotion work. Since the whole universe is a mighty thought form called into existence by the Logos, it may well be that tiny parts of it also result from the thought forms of minor entities engaged in the same creative work. This conception naturally recalls the Hindu belief that there are 330 million devas. It is also worthy of notice that, whilst some of the thought forms are so complicated and so exquisitely fashioned as to be beyond the power of the human hand to reproduce, yet they may be very closely approximated by mechanical means. The instrument, known as a harmonograph, consists of a fine point guided in its path by several pendulums, each of which has its own independent swing, all of these being welded into one composite movement, which is communicated to the pointer, and which the pointer registers on a suitable surface. Other, though simpler forms, resemble the sand figures produced by the well-known Chladni's sound plate or by the idophone, vide idophone voice figures, by Margaret Watts Hughes. Scales and arpeggios thrown out lasso-like loops and curves. A song with a chorus produces a number of beads strung on a silver thread of melody. In a glee or part song, intertwining threads of different colors and textures are produced. A processional hymn builds a series of precise rectangular forms, like the links of a chain or the carriages of a railway train. An Anglican chant makes glittering fragments, quite different from the glowing uniformity of the Gregorian tone, which is not unlike the effect of Sanskrit verses chanted by an Indian pundit. Military music produces a long stream of rhythmically vibrating forms, the regular beat of these undulations tending to strengthen those of the astral bodies of the soldiers, the impact of a succession of steady and powerful oscillations supplying for the time the place of the will force which, through fatigue, may have been slackened. A thunderstorm creates a flaming band of color, a crash making a form suggestive of an exploding bomb, or an irregular sphere with spikes projecting from it. Sea waves breaking on the shore create wavy, parallel lines of changing color, becoming mountain ranges in a storm. Wind in the leaves of forest covers it with iridescent network, rising and falling with gentle wave-like movement. The song of birds shows as curving lines and loops of light, from the golden globes of the campanero to the amorphous and coarsely colored mass of the scream of a parrot or macaw. The roar of a lion is also visible in higher matter, and it is possible that some wild creatures are able to see it clairvoyantly, thus adding to their terror. A purring cat surrounds itself with concentric rosy cloud films. A barking dog shoots forth well-defined sharp-pointed projectiles not unlike a rifle bullet, which pierce the astral bodies of people and seriously disturb them. The bay of a bloodhound throws off beads like footballs, slower in motion and less liable to injure. The color of these projectiles is usually red or brown, varying with the emotion of the animal and the key of his voice. The lowing of a cow produces blunt-ended clumsy shapes like logs of wood. A flock of sheep makes a many-pointed yet amorphous cloud not unlike a dust cloud. The cooing of a pair of doves makes graceful curved forms like the letter S reversed. Turning to human sounds, an angry ejaculation throws itself forth like a scarlet spear. A stream of silly chatter produces an intricate network of hard brown-gray metallic lines, forming an almost perfect barrier against any higher or more beautiful thoughts and feelings. The astral body of a garrulous person is a striking object lesson on the folly of unnecessary, useless, and unpleasant speech. A child's laughter bubbles forth in rosy curves. The guffaw of an empty-minded person causes an explosive effect in an irregular mass, usually brown or dirty green. A sneer throws out a shapeless projectile of dull red, usually flecked with brownish green and bristling with sharp points. The cachinnations of the self-conscious produce the appearance and color of a pool of boiling mud. Nervous giggles creates a seaweed-like tangle of brown and dull yellow lines, and have a very bad effect upon the astral body. A jolly, kindly laugh billows out in rounded forms of gold and green. A soft and musical whistle produces an effect not unlike that of a small flute, but sharper and more metallic. Tuneless whistling sends out small piercing projectiles of dirty brown. Fidgetiness or fussiness produces in the aura tremulous vibrations, so that no thought or feeling can pass in or out without distortion, even good through that is being sent out taking with it a shiver that practically neutralizes it. Accuracy in thought is essential, but it should be attained not by hurry or fuss but by perfect calmness. The strident screech of a railway engine makes a far more penetrating and powerful projectile than even the bark of a dog, producing upon the astral body an effect comparable to that of a sword thrust upon the physical body. An astral wound heals in a few minutes, but the shock to the astral organism disappears by no means so readily. The firing of a gun produces a serious effect upon astral currents and astral bodies. Rifle or pistol fire throws out a stream of small needles. Repeated noises affect the mental and astral bodies precisely as blows affect the physical body. In the physical body the result would be pain, in the astral body it means irritability, in the mental body a feeling of fatigue and inability to think clearly. It is abundantly clear that all loud, sharp or sudden sounds should, as far as possible, be avoided by anyone who wishes to keep his astral and mental vehicles in good order. Especially disastrous is the effect, e.g., of the ceaseless noise and roar of a city upon the plastic astral and mental bodies of children. All the sounds of nature blend themselves into one tone, called by the Chinese the great tone, or kung. This also has its form, a synthesis of all forms, vast and changeful as the sea, representing the note of our earth in the music of the spheres. This is said by some writers to be the note F of our scale. It is, of course, possible to destroy a thought form, and this is sometimes done, for example, where a person after death is pursued by a malignant thought form, created probably by the hate of those whom the person had injured whilst in the physical world. Although such a thought form may appear almost as a living creature, an instance is given where it resembled a huge distorted gorilla. It is simply a temporary creation of evil passion and in no sense an evolving entity, so that to dissipate it is simply like destroying a Leyden jar, and it is not in any sense a criminal action. Most men recognize that acts which injure others are definitely and obviously wrong, but few recognize that it is also wrong to feel jealousy, hatred, ambition, etc., even though such feelings are not expressed in speech or deed. An examination of the conditions of life after death, chapters 13 to 15, reveals that such feelings injure the man who harbors them, and cause him acute suffering after death. A study of thought forms thus brings home to the earnest student the tremendous possibilities of such creations, and the responsibility attaching to a right use of them. Thoughts are not only things, but exceedingly puissant things. Every one is generating them unceasingly night and day. Often it is not possible to render physical aid to those in need, but there is no case in which help may not be given by thought, or in which it can fail to produce a definite result. No one need hesitate to use this power to the full, provided always that it be employed for unselfish purposes, and for furthering the divine scheme of evolution. Chapter 8. Physical Life. In Chapter 2 we considered, in general outline, the composition and structure of the astral body. We shall now proceed to study it, in greater detail, as it exists and is used during the ordinary waking consciousness of the physical body. The factors which determine the nature and quality of the astral body during physical life may be roughly grouped as follows. 1. The physical life. 2. The emotional life. 3. The mental life. 1. The physical life. We have already seen that every particle of the physical body has its corresponding astral counterpart. Consequently, as the solids, liquids, gases and ethers of which the physical is composed may be coarse or refined, gross or delicate, so will be the nature of the corresponding astral envelopes. A physical body nourished on impure food will produce a corresponding impure astral body, whilst a physical body fed on clean food and drink will help to purify the astral vehicle. The astral body being the vehicle of emotion, passion, and sensation, it follows that an astral body of the grosser type will be chiefly amenable to the grosser varieties of passion and emotion, whereas a finer astral body will more readily vibrate to more refined emotions and aspirations. It is impossible to make the physical body coarse and at the same time to organize the astral and mental bodies for finer purposes, neither is it possible to have a pure physical body with impure mental and astral bodies. All three bodies are thus interdependent. Not only the physical body, but also the higher bodies also, are affected by the food which is eaten. Carnivorous diet is fatal to anything like real occult development, and those who adopt it are throwing serious and unnecessary difficulties in their own way, for flesh food intensifies all the undesirable elements and passions of the lower planes. In the ancient mysteries were men of the utmost purity, and they were invariably vegetarian. The Raja Yogi takes especial pains to purify the physical body by an elaborate system of food, drink, sleep, etc., and insists on foods which are sattvic, or rhythmic. A whole system relating to foodstuffs is built up to help in the preparation of the body for use by the higher consciousness. Flesh foods are rajasic, they come under the quality of activity, being stimulants, and built up to express animal desires and activities. They are utterly unsuited to the finer type of nervous organization. The yogi therefore cannot afford to use these for the higher processes of thought. Foods on the way to decay, such as game, venison, etc., as well as alcohol, are tamasic, or heavy, and also to be avoided. Foods which tend to growth, such as grain and fruits, are sattvic, or rhythmic, being the most highly vitalist and suitable for building up a body sensitive and at the same time strong. Certain other substances also affect the physical and astral bodies detrimentally. Thus tobacco permeates the physical body with impure particles, causing emanations so material that they are frequently perceptible to the sense of smell. Astrally, tobacco not only introduces impurity, but tends also to deaden the sensibility of the body, soothing the nerves, as it is called. While this may, in conditions of modern life, be sometimes less harmful than leaving the nerves unsoothed, it is certain undesirable for an occultist, who needs the capacity of answering instantly to all possible vibrations, combined, of course, with perfect control. Similarly, there is no doubt whatever that from the point of view of both astral and mental bodies the use of alcohol is always an evil. Bodies fed on flesh and alcohol are liable to be thrown out of health by opening up of the higher consciousness, and nervous diseases are partly due to the fact that the human consciousness is trying to express itself through bodies clogged with flesh products and poisoned with alcohol. In particular, the pituitary body is very readily poisoned by even a very small amount of alcohol, and its highest evolution is thereby checked. It is the poisoning of the pituitary body with alcohol that leads to the abnormal and irrational vision associated with delirium tremens. In addition to the direct coarsening of the physical and astral bodies, meat, tobacco, and alcohol are open also to the serious objection that they tend to attract undesirable astral entities which take pleasure in the scent of blood and spirits. They surge around the person, impressing their thoughts upon him, forcing their impressions on his astral body, so that the person may have a kind of shell of objectionable entities hanging onto his aura. Principally for this reason, in the yoga of the right-hand path, meat and wine are absolutely forbidden. These entities consist of artificial elementals, given birth to by the thoughts and desires of men, and also of depraved men imprisoned in their astral bodies, known as elementaries. See page 145. The elementals are attracted towards people whose astral bodies contain matter congenial to their nature, while the elementaries naturally seek to indulge in vices such as they themselves encouraged while in physical bodies. An astral clairvoyant can see hordes of loathsome elementals crowding round butchers' shops, whilst in beer houses and gin palaces elementaries specially gather, feasting on the emanation of the liquors, and thrusting themselves sometimes into the very bodies of the drinkers. Nearly all drugs, such as opium, cocaine, theine in tea, caffeine in coffee, etc., produce a deleterious effect upon the higher vehicles. Occasionally they are, of course, almost a necessity, in certain diseases, but an occultist should use them as sparingly as possible. One who knows how to do it can remove the evil effect of opium, which may have been used to relieve great pain, from the astral and mental bodies after it has done its work on the physical. Dirt of all kinds is also more objectionable in the higher worlds even than in the physical, and attracts a low class of nature spirits. The occultist therefore needs to be stringent in all matters of cleanliness. A special attention should be paid to the hands and feet, because through these extremities emanations flow out so readily. Physical noises, such as prevail in cities, jar the nerves and thus cause irritations and fatigue. The effect is accentuated by the pressure of so many astral bodies vibrating at different rates, and all excited and disturbed by trifles. Although such irritation is superficial, and may pass out of the mind in 10 minutes, yet an effect may be produced in the astral body lasting for 48 hours. Hence it is difficult, whilst living in modern cities, to avoid irritability, especially for one whose bodies are more highly strung and sensitive than those of the ordinary man. In general, it may be said that everything which promotes the health of the physical body also reacts favorably upon the higher vehicles. Travel is another of the many factors which affect the astral body, by bringing to bear on the traveler a change of etheric and astral influences connected with each place or district. Ocean, mountain, forest, waterfall, each has its own special type of life, astral and etheric as well as visible, and therefore its own set of influences. Many of these unseen entities are pouring out vitality, and in any case their effect on etheric, astral, and mental bodies is likely to be healthy and desirable in the long run, though a change may be somewhat tiring at the time. Hence an occasional change from town to country is beneficial on the ground of emotional as well as physical health. The astral body may also be affected by such objects as talismans. The methods of making them have already been described in the Etheric Double, pages 113 to 119. We shall here deal only with their general effects. When an object is strongly charged with magnetism for a particular purpose by a competent person, it becomes a talisman, and when properly made continues to radiate this magnetism with unimpaired strength for many years. It may be used for many purposes. Thus, for example, a talisman may be charged with thoughts of purity, which will express themselves as definite rates of vibration in astral and mental matter. These vibratory rates, being directly contrary to thoughts of impurity, will tend to neutralize or overpower any impure thought which may arise. In many cases the impure thought is a casual one that has been picked up and is not therefore a thing of great power in itself. The talisman, on the other hand, has been intentionally and strongly charged, so that when the two streams of thought meet, there is not the slightest doubt that the thoughts connected with the talisman will vanquish the others. In addition, the initial conflict between the opposing sets of thoughts will attract the man's attention, and thus give him time to recollect himself, so that he will not be taken off this guard, as so frequently happens. Another example would be that of a talisman charged with faith and courage. This would operate in two ways. First, the vibrations radiating from the talisman would oppose feelings of fear as soon as they arose, and thus prevent them from accumulating and strengthening one another, as they often do, until they become irresistible. The effect has been compared to that of a gyroscope which, once set in motion in one direction, strongly resists being turned into another direction. Secondly, the talisman works indirectly upon the mind of the wearer. As soon as he feels the beginnings of fear, he will probably recollect the talisman, and call up the reserve strength of his own will to resist the undesirable feeling. A third possibility of a talisman is that of its being linked with the person who made it. In the event of the wearer being in desperate circumstances, he may call upon the maker and evoke a response from him. The maker may or may not be physically conscious of the appeal, but in any case his ego will be conscious and will respond by reinforcing the vibrations of the talisman. Certain articles are to a large extent natural amulets or talismans. All precious stones are such, each having a distinct influence which can be utilized in two ways. 1. The influence attracts to it elemental essence of a certain kind, and thoughts and desires which naturally express themselves through that essence. 2. These natural peculiarities make it a fit vehicle for magnetism which is intended to work along the same line as those thoughts and emotions. Thus, for example, for an amulet of purity, a stone should be chosen whose natural undulations are inharmonious to the key in which impure thoughts express themselves. Although the particles of the stone are physical, yet, being in a key identical at this level with the key of purity on higher levels, they will, even without the stone being magnetized, check impure thought or feeling by virtue of the overtones. Furthermore, the stone can readily be charged at astral and mental levels with the undulations of pure thought and feeling which are set in the same key. Other examples are, 1. The Rudraksh berry, frequently used for necklaces in India, which is especially suitable for magnetization where sustained holy thought or meditation is required, and where all disturbing influences are to be kept away. 2. The beads of the Tulsi plant, whose influence is somewhat different. Objects which produce strong scents are natural talismans. Thus the gums chosen for incense give out radiations favorable to spiritual and devotional thought, and do not harmonize with any form of disturbance or worry. Medieval witches sometimes combined the ingredients of incense so as to produce the opposite effect, and it is also done today in Luciferian ceremonies. It is generally desirable to avoid coarse and heavy scents, such as that of musk or of sachet powder, as many of them are akin to sensual feelings. An object not intentionally charged may sometimes have the force of a talisman, example, a present from a friend, worn on the person, such as a ring or chain, or even a letter. An object, such as a watch, habitually carried in the pocket, becomes charged with magnetism and is able, if given away, to produce decided effects on the recipient. Coins and money notes are usually charged with mixed magnetism, feeling, and thought, and may, therefore, radiate a disturbing and irritating effect. A man's thoughts and feelings thus affect not only himself and other people, but also impregnate the inanimate objects round him, even walls and furniture. He thus unconsciously magnetizes these physical objects, so that they have the power of suggesting similar thoughts and feelings to other people within range of their influence. 2. The emotional life. It is scarcely necessary to insist that the quality of the astral body is largely determined by the kind of feelings and emotions which constantly play through it. A man is using his astral body, whether he be conscious of the fact or not, whenever he expresses an emotion, just as he is using his mental body whenever he thinks, or his physical body whenever he performs physical work. This, of course, is quite a different thing from utilizing his astral body as an independent vehicle through which his consciousness can be fully expressed, a matter which we shall have to consider later, in due course. The astral body, as we have seen, is the field of manifestation of desire, the mirror in which every feeling is instantly reflected, in which even every thought which has in it anything that touches the personal self must express itself. From the material of the astral body bodily form is given to the dark elementals, which men create and set in motion by evil wishes and malicious feelings. From it also are bodied forth the beneficent elementals called into life by good wishes, gratitude, and love. The astral body grows by use, just as every other body does, and it also has its own habits, built up and fixed by constant repetition of similar acts. The astral body during physical life being the recipient of and responded to stimuli both from the physical body and from the lower mental, it tends to repeat automatically vibrations to which it is accustomed. Just as the hand may repeat a familiar gesture, so may the astral body repeat a familiar feeling or thought. All the activities that we call evil, whether selfish thoughts, mental, or selfish emotions, astral, invariably show themselves as vibrations of the coarser matter of those planes, whilst good and unselfish thought or emotion sets in vibrations the higher types of matter. As finer matter is more easily moved than coarse, it follows that a given amount of force spent in good thought or feeling produces perhaps 100 times as much result as the same amount of force sent out into coarser matter. If this were not so, it is obvious that the ordinary man could never make any progress at all. The effect of 10% of force directed to good ends enormously outweighs that of 90% devoted to selfish purposes, and so on the whole such a man makes an appreciable advance from life to life. A man who has even 1% of good makes a slight advance. A man whose account balances exactly, so that he neither advances nor retrogresses, must live a distinctly evil life, whilst in order to go downwards in evil a person must be an unusually consistent villain. Thus even people who are doing nothing consciously towards their evolution, and who let everything go as it will, are nevertheless gradually evolving, because of the irresistible force of the logos which is steadily pressing them onwards. But they are moving so slowly that it will take them millions of years of incarnation and trouble and uselessness to gain even a step. The method by which progress is made certain is simple and ingenious. As we have seen, evil qualities are vibrations of the coarser matter of the respective planes, while good qualities are expressed through the higher grades of matter. From this follow two remarkable results. It must be borne in mind that each subplane of the astral body has a special relationship to the corresponding subplane of the mental body. Thus the 4 lower astral subplanes correspond to the 4 kinds of matter in the mental body, while the 3 higher astral subplanes correspond to the 3 kinds of matter in the causal body. Hence the lower astral vibrations can find no matter in the causal body capable of responding to them, and so the higher qualities alone can be built into the causal body. Thence it emerges that any good which a man develops in himself is permanently recorded by a change in his causal body, while the evil which he does, feels, or thinks cannot possibly touch the real ego, but can cause disturbance and trouble only to the mental body, which is renewed for each fresh incarnation. The result of evil is stored in the astral and mental permanent atoms. The man, therefore, has still to face it all over and over again, until he has vanquished it, and finally rooted from his vehicles all tendency to respond to it. That is evidently a very different matter from taking it into the ego and making it really a part of himself. Astral matter responds more rapidly than physical to every impulse formed the world of mind, and consequently the astral body of a man, being made of astral matter, shares this readiness to respond to the impact of thought, and thrills in answer to every thought that strikes it, whether the thoughts come from without, i.e., from the minds of other men, or from within, from the mind of its owner. An astral body, therefore, which is made by its owner to respond habitually to evil thoughts acts as a magnet to similar thought, and emotion forms in its vicinity, whereas a pure astral body acts on such thoughts with repulsive energy, and attracts to itself thought, and emotion forms of matter and vibrations congruous with its own. For it must be borne in mind that the astral world is full of thoughts and emotions of other men, and that these exert a ceaseless pressure, constantly bombarding every astral body and setting up in it vibrations similar to their own. In addition, there are nature spirits, see page 181, of a low order, which enjoy the coarse vibrations of anger and hatred, and throw themselves into any current of such nature, thus intensifying the undulations and adding fresh life to them. People yielding themselves to coarse feelings can depend on being constantly surrounded by such carrion crows of the astral world who jostle one another in eager anticipation of an outburst of passion. Many of the moods to which most people are subject, in greater or lesser degree, are due to outside astral influences. Whilst depression, for example, may be due to a purely physical cause, such as indigestion, a chill, fatigue, etc., even more frequently it is caused by the presence of an astral entity who is himself depressed and is hovering around either in search of sympathy or in the hope of drawing from the subject the vitality which he lacks. Furthermore, a man who, for example, is beside himself with rage, temporarily loses hold of his astral body, the desire elemental, see page 6, becoming supreme. Under such circumstances the man may be seized upon and obsessed either by a dead man of similar nature or by some evil artificial elemental. The student should sternly and especially disregard depression, which is a great barrier to progress, and at least should endeavor to let no one else know that he is oppressed by it. It indicates that he is thinking more of himself than of the master, and it makes it more difficult for the master's influence to act upon him. Depression causes much suffering to sensitive people, and is responsible for much of the terror of children at night. The inner life of an aspirant ought not to be one of continual emotional oscillation. Above all things, the aspirant should learn not to worry. Contentment is not incompatible with aspiration. Optimism is justified by the certainty of the ultimate triumph of good, though it is true that if we take into account only the physical plane it is not easy to maintain that position. Under the stress of very powerful emotions, if a man lets himself go too far, he may die, become insane, or be obsessed. Such obsession need not necessarily be what we call evil, though the truth is that all obsession is injurious. An illustration of this phenomenon may be taken from conversion at a religious revival. On such occasions some men get worked up into a condition of such tremendous emotional excitement that they swing beyond the degree of safety. They may then be obsessed by a departed preacher of the same religious persuasion, and thus two souls may be temporarily worked through one body. The tremendous energy of these hysterical excesses is contagious and may spread rapidly through a crowd. An astral disturbance is set up of the nature of a gigantic whirlpool. Towards this poor astral entities whose one desire is for sensation, these are all kinds of nature spirits, see page 181, who delight in and bathe in the vibrations of wild excitement, of whatever character, be it religious or sexual, just as children pay in the surf. They supply and reinforce the energy so recklessly expended. The dominant idea being usually the selfish one of saving one's own soul, the astral matter is of a coarse kind, and the nature spirits are also of a primitive type. The emotional effect of a religious revival is thus very powerful. In some cases a man may be genuinely and permanently benefited by his conversion, but the serious student of occultism should avoid such excesses of emotional excitement, which for many people are apt to be dangerous. Excitement is alien to the spiritual life. There are, of course, many causes of insanity. It may be due to defects in one or more of the vehicles, physical, etheric, astral, mental. In one variety it is caused by a want of accurate adjustment between the astral particles and the particles of either the etheric or the mental body. Such a case would not recover sanity until he reached the heaven world, i.e., until he had left his astral body and passed into his mental body. This type of insanity is rare. The effect on the astral body caused by astral vibrations of another astral body has long been recognized in the East, and is one of the reasons why it is such an immense advantage to a pupil to live in close proximity to one more highly evolved than himself. An Indian teacher not only may prescribe for his pupil special kinds of exercises or study, in order to purify, strengthen, and develop the astral body, but also by keeping the pupil in his neighborhood physically seeks by this close association to harmonize and attune the pupil's vehicles to his own. Such a teacher has already calmed his own vehicles and accustomed them to vibrate at a few carefully selected rates instead of in 100 promiscuous frenzies. These few rates of vibration are very strong and steady, and each day and night, whether he is sleeping or waking, they play unceasingly upon the vehicles of the pupil, and gradually raise him to his teacher's key. For similar reasons, an Indian, who wishes to live the higher life, retires to the jungle, as a man of other races withdraws from the world and lives as a hermit. He thus has at least breathing space, and rest from the endless conflict caused by the perpetual battering on his vehicles of other people's feelings and thoughts, and can find time to think coherently. The calm influences of nature are also to a certain extent helpful. Somewhat analogous are the effects produced on animals which are closely associated with human beings. The devotion of an animal for the master whom he loves, and his mental efforts to understand his master's wishes and to please him, enormously develop the animal's intellect and his power of devotion and affection. But in addition to this, the constant play of the man's vehicles on those of the animal greatly assist the process, and thus prepare the way for the animal to individualize and become a human entity. It is possible, by an effort of will, to make a shell of astral matter on the periphery of the astral aura. This may be done for three purposes: 1. To keep out emotional vibrations, such as anger, envy, or hatred, intentionally directed at one by another. 2. To keep out casual vibrations of low type which may be floating in the astral world and impinge upon one's aura. 3. To protect the astral body during meditation. Such shells do not usually last for long, but need to be frequently renewed if required for any length of time. Such a shell would, of course, keep vibrations in as well as out. The student should therefore make the shell only of the coarsest astral matter, as he will not wish to keep away, or to prevent from passing outwards, vibrations in the higher types of astral matter. As a general principle, it may be said that to use a shell for oneself is to some extent a confession of weakness, as if one is all one should be. No artificial protection of this kind would be needed. On the other hand, shells may often be used with advantage to help other people who need protection. It will be recollected, see page 6, that a man's astral body consists not only of ordinary astral matter, but also of a quantity of elemental essence. During the man's life, this elemental essence is segregated from the ocean of similar matter around, and practically becomes for that time what may be described as a kind of artificial elemental, see page 450, i.e., a kind of semi-intelligent separate entity known as the desire elemental. The desire elemental follows the course of its own evolution downwards into matter without any reference to, or, indeed, any knowledge of, the convenience or intention of the ego to whom it happens to be attached. Its interests are thus diametrically opposed to those of the men, as it is seeking ever stronger and coarser vibrations. Hence the perpetual struggle described by St. Paul as, the law in the members warring against the law of the mind. Furthermore, finding that association with the mental matter of the man's mind-body brings to it more vivid vibrations, it endeavors to stir up the mental matter into sympathy with it, and to induce the man to believe that he desires the sensations which it desires. Consequently, it becomes a sort of tempter. Nevertheless, the desire elemental is not an evil entity. In fact, it is not an evolving entity at all, having no power of reincarnation. It is only the essence of which it is composed which is evolving, nor has this shadowy being any evil designs upon the man, for it knows nothing whatever of the men of whom, for the time, it forms a part. It is thus in no way a fiend to the regarded with horror, but is as much a part of the divine life as the man himself, though at a different stage of its unfoldment. It is a mistake to imagine that by refusing to gratify the desire elemental with coarse vibrations, a man is thereby checking its evolution, for this is not the case. By controlling the passions and developing the higher qualities, a man drops the lower and helps to evolve the higher types of essence. The lower kinds of vibrations can be supplied by an animal, at some later time, even better than by a man, whereas no one but a man can evolve the higher type of essence. All through life a man should definitely fight against the desire elemental and its tendency to seek for the lower, coarser physical vibrations, recognizing quite clearly that its consciousness, its like and dislikes, are not his own. He has himself created it and should not become a slave to it, but learn to control it and realize himself as apart from it. This matter will be further considered in Chapter 12. 3. The mental life. Our third and last factor which affects the astral body during ordinary waking consciousness is the mental life. The mental activities have the most far-reaching effects on the astral body for two reasons. 1. Because lower mental matter, manas, is so inextricably linked with astral matter, that it is almost impossible for most people to utilize one without the other, i.e., few people can think without at the same time feeling, or feel without at the same time, to some extent, thinking. 2. Because the organization and control of the astral body rest with the mind. This is an example of the general principle that each body is built up by consciousness working in the plane next above it. Without the creative power of thought, the astral body cannot be organized. Every impulse sent by the mind to the physical body has to pass through the astral body, and produces an effect on it also. Further, as astral matter is far more responsive to thought vibrations than is physical, the effect of mental vibrations on it is proportionately greater than on the physical body. Consequently, a controlled, trained, and developed mind tends also to bring the astral body under control and to develop it. When, however, the mind is not actively controlling the astral body, the latter, being peculiarly susceptible to the influence of passing thought currents, is perpetually receiving these stimuli from without, and eagerly responding to them. So far, we have